so much, all of you, for being here. Now, as you know, today was meant to be the live book launch, but due to various things that conspired against us, we're online. But there's two huge benefits to this. Number one, I get to see so many of you that wouldn't have been able to be at the live one in person. And number two, hey, I'm able to wear my butterfly summer dress as I don't have to go outside. So that's like the best moment. Now, I sat here this morning thinking about what to say, and I couldn't come up with words to share how excited I am that the Tiny Voices talk book, yes, this beautiful thing, and the book launch are here. To have on a Zoom call my family, my friends, my wonderful work colleagues, the amazing people I've met through social media, the tiny voices and the not so tiny, it's unbelievable. Especially when it's meant to celebrate a book that came out of my head. That's the most bizarre thing for me. Like, that came out of my head somehow. Anyway, even though I've got no words, I'm going to talk. I'll try to keep it short and not go for the whole sort of time. I always start my podcast interviews by asking who someone is. So who is Toria Bono? From an educational perspective, I'm a slightly over-enthusiastic primary teacher who has been teaching for over 20 years and currently teaches year 4 full time. I'm also doing an apprenticeship in coaching and mentoring and a diploma in coaching. I love education, just love it. And anyone that has seen me teach knows how much I love teaching. I adore teaching, but I also love supporting colleagues and helping them to realize their potential, thus the coaching. In school, I'm an English champion, I'm part of the metacognition team, the wellbeing team, the feedback team, and I'm also the coaching lead. Out of school, I host the Tiny Voice Talks podcast, and I'm now the author of the Tiny Voices Talk book. Yeah, I'm going to hold it up a lot. I'm also a mum, wife, and as you will see in the acknowledgements, if you read the acknowledgements of the book, no one in my family is surprised when I decide to spin yet another plate. In 2020, one of the plates I decided to spin was Twitter, and that has genuinely changed my life. So let me take you back to February 2020 and a tweet, a question that some of my work colleagues that are on here may remember. I didn't get an answer. I was so frustrated. I was angry. I was bemused. I was like, oh my goodness, how do the big names get answers and I don't? How is it fair? Tiny people like me never get answers. And that began my many, many, many hashtags. And if you've lived through it since 2020, you will know that there were many. They began with Tiny Voice Tuesday, which was a question and answer service supported by the TVT tag team. They were people that I recruited off Twitter to answer the questions. I think some of the original team are here today. Put your hand up if you were in the original TVT tag team. I think a few people were around and in it. Then Tiny Voice Tuesday Unite started, which was a thread that ran on a Tuesday, rather like a virtual community centre for people to pop in and say hi, a place where everyone knows your name, rather like the cheers of Twitter. I started it just before COVID, and at the height of COVID, 500 people were joining just to have their voice heard. Educators who were on their own, teaching virtually, missing their school community, found it through that hashtag. Now, in August 2020, I was asked if I would start a podcast to raise the voices of the tinier educators higher. So I did. In all honesty, I had literally no clue what I was doing, but I was described yesterday as an adaptive expert. I'm loving that new phrase. I'm going to put it somewhere. Apparently, I'm someone who is always willing to give something new a try and adapt it if need be. Now, Sharifa Lee, who is on here, was my very first guest, and we had so much fun chatting. We called some of our episodes Chatterbox because that's what we did. I've gone on to interview over 140 guests, many of whom are on here today, and their voices have been heard all over the world. Bizarrely, Tiny Voice Talks is really popular in Australia. I've learned about race, metacognition, trauma-informed teaching, SEND, how to support LGBTQIA+ children, how to improve well-being, professional development. I'm also slightly passionate about English, so there are a number of episodes devoted to this subject. My podcast has made me a better teacher, and that's why I love doing it. At the beginning of 2021, John McGee, the kindness coach, who I believe is also on here, helped me to rebrand and bring everything under one name. He did point out that I had so many hashtags that it was just getting a bit insane. Now, at the same time, I began hosting a show on Teacher Hug Radio called Origins, and I began to interview some of the bigger voices in education. Again, some of you are on here. I learned about their journeys and loved every single conversation. Following one with Ian Gilbert, he asked me if I was Tiny Voices, and I went, oh yeah, no, that's me. And he asked me if there was a book in there. Now, remember, I'm an adaptive expert, so of course I said yes. I knew that I wanted to raise the voices of the quieter educators even more, and this was a great way to do it. I went in naively. Ian would probably say incredibly naively. I thought it'd be quite simple to put a book together. I didn't realize it was going to take a year and a half. There are a number of bumps in the road, but today we have this book, and I am incredibly proud of it. I couldn't have done it without Ian's help, support. He had to answer many, many, many emails from me, and also the support of Crown House Publishing. I wanted to create a book that would impact on the young people in our classrooms, and I think we've done that. No, I don't think that we have. I know we have. The contributors to the book range from early years to higher education, and they have a myriad of experiences, and these come together to create a practical resource for all educators, leaders, teachers, teaching assistants, ECTs, teaching students. There are quick wins and strong messages. You see, the thing is, tiny voices are incredibly powerful. Now, if you've read the introduction to the book, you will know that I talk about the butterfly effect. That's the dress, everyone. The idea was conceived over 45 years ago by Edward Lorenz, a meteorology professor, who wanted to demonstrate that small, insignificant events can lead to much larger significant events over time. Lorenz proposed that the simple act of a butterfly flapping its wings in Tokyo could lead to a tornado in Tennessee. He didn't mean it quite as literally as some have taken it, but the idea is nonetheless a powerful one. The simple act of a butterfly flapping its wings could lead to a small change that eventually could create a significant event. Butterflies, therefore, have more power than at first supposed. All they need to do is stop flapping their wings. Now, I think the tiny voice talks effect is very similar to the butterfly effect. When we find our voices and use them, even if we're only whispering, change happens. I have received so many messages from people who have spoken up and instigated change in their classroom, school, and professional lives. They've been spurred on by Tiny Voice Talks. They found their voice and started using it. What's become clear to me is that when Tiny Voices talk, three amazing things happen. One, they share surprising insights and ideas. Two, they realize they're not so tiny. Three, they empower other tiny voices to talk too. We work in a profession that is creating our future. Yes, we are teaching our future doctors, scientists, teachers, and yet we so often keep quiet. The book's full title is Tiny Voices Talk: Education, Engagement, Empowerment. And my hope is that this book will not only equip others with the knowledge they need to teach well, but will also enable them to engage with others and feel empowered to use their voice and instigate change. Imagine, like seriously, imagine if educators realized the power of their voice and were able to pass that on to the children they teach. Imagine if the future we're creating is one in which young people know how to use their voice, but more importantly, they're not scared to flap their wings. Now, I'm an incredibly proud teacher, in case you hadn't worked that one out. And in 2020, I became a fellow of the Chartered College of Teaching. This was probably one of my proudest moments. And my certificate is displayed, it's up there. And I'm so happy that Dame Alison Peacock is one of the Tiny's greatest supporters. And that, yes, she's come along to our virtual book launch today. Thank you so much, Alison. And I wonder if I can pass over to you now to say a few words.
Well, thank you so much, Toria. I'm really humbled to be here. I think what you've achieved is amazing. And I just really applaud what you've done. In fact, I've gone so far as to take a quote from Barack Obama. So here we are. And Barack Obama said, "One voice can change a room. And if one voice can change a room, then it can change a city. And if it can change a city, it can change a state. And if it can change a state, it can change a nation, it can change the world. Your voice can change the world." Now that concept, similar to what you were talking about, the butterfly effect, is really powerful. And I absolutely believe this. You know, you started to appear on my timeline on Twitter amongst lots of macho voices, amongst lots of voices that were talking about false certainties, as if everything had all been sorted in education. We all knew. In fact, I've had responses to some of my tweets saying, well, we know how children learn and we know how teachers teach, so we might as well stop talking about it because we understand this now. No, we don't. No, we do not. The whole notion of being a teacher is to be a lifelong learner, is to be someone who is reflective, who is listening, who is open. And when I engaged in my own research, Learning Without Limits, together with researchers from the University of Cambridge, we identified some key dispositions for learning that I want to share with you this afternoon, because I think they will resonate with all of the tiny voices on here. I really hope they will resonate with you. So the first disposition that we felt that we saw when we were thinking about teaching that didn't label children was a disposition of openness to ideas, openness to possibilities, openness to being surprised by what our children could achieve, which is the opposite of believing that there is one right way or that all outcomes are predictable. I hope that really resonates with you. The second, questioning, restlessness, humility. If you don't mind me saying so, Toria, you kind of embody restlessness now that I've seen you in person. But that restlessness is all about refusing to rely on ready-made certainties, ready-made solutions. It's always about how can we look beyond what we're currently being told and see what else we might do. And to do this, we have to be inventive. So inventiveness is about offering and finding creative responses to challenges. And my goodness me, we need creative responses to challenges right now when we're being told everything is sorted. It isn't. We have to resist a compliance with imposed models, with imposed materials, with imposed ways of doing things. It might sound like it's easier, it might sound like it's more efficient, but it's to be resisted because we need to maintain that inventiveness in order that we can build inventiveness amongst our children, amongst our students. And when I read your stories in this wonderful book, I'll wave it now, you know, there was inventiveness at the heart of all of those stories. Persistence. You've needed to be persistent to get this book published, but in my mind, there was never any doubt, to be honest, because you have to be persistent, but with courage and humility. And it strikes me, just in calling yourselves tiny voices, you've got humility in spades. And humility is a very powerful disposition because actually it attracts people to you. It helps you build something that goes beyond your wildest dreams, whilst being humble about the very origins of it. And if I might draw a slight parallel, I feel as though the work that we're doing to build the Chartered College of Teaching came from similar origins. It came from a desire to share, a desire to collaborate, a desire to not to say what's right and what's wrong, but to build the space for voices to be heard, for a plurality of views to be respected, rather than loud macho voices thinking they can quite simply win the argument. I think by stealth, the Chartered College is actually doing quite a lot of that. And I'm really proud of that methodology. It's quite a feminine kind of approach to leadership, which is about exactly as you've done, Toria and Tiny Voices, taking people with you along the way, as opposed to stamping around and demanding that you be heard. So that persistence with courage and humility is the opposite to settling for easy answers. It's the opposite to rejecting complexity. It's about recognizing the very complexity of the issues that we face in education and embracing them. And of course, a lot of what we try and do in education is really hard. There are many challenges that we are facing post-pandemic, challenges that young people are feeling in terms of their own mental health, but families who are facing the economic realities of a downturn, of maybe not being able to pay the bills, of maybe facing homelessness, terrifying prospects for families. Of course, those families are going to stomp into your school and be difficult. Of course, they're going to be difficult if someone's plimsoll gets lost, not necessarily because of the plimsoll, although actually that too, but because it's symptomatic of an overall worry. And when you come into school, you know that you're going to be sympathetically heard, and you're going to be talking to people who have authority that you can trust. That's you. That's what makes such a difference in our society, you. And all of this through building a culture of emotional stability, where you are able to take risks, which is exactly what you're doing today. You know, at the beginning of this introduction, there were people saying, oh, you know, that maybe some colleagues were quite nervous. Don't be nervous. Your voice is as important as anybody else's. And it's really lovely that you've got a trusting environment in which you can share your ideas and be heard. Really brilliant. So emotional stability is the opposite of a culture where failure is feared, where trying new things is resisted, because you've been brave enough to try new things. You've been brave enough to write. You've been brave enough to engage in this event. You'll be brave enough to do who knows what in the future, which is fantastic. And all of this in the spirit of generosity, because generosity welcomes difference. It's not frightened of difference, it celebrates difference. Generosity is what makes you the wonderful teachers that you are, the wonderful educationists that you are, because you're able to understand that everybody's difference contributes to diversity, which means that we're all that much richer, and that we have a much greater opportunity to learn collectively when we resist a notion of deficit thinking, when we resist notions of desires for uniformity. So we must resist deficit thinking at all costs, all about opportunity. And then the final disposition is one of empathy, of mutual supportiveness. Well, you just embody this, absolutely. That notion of working together, resisting fear, resisting defensiveness, resisting blame, of calling people out. This is about everybody's voice, everybody being heard, everybody really mattering. So, as I say, it's a huge privilege to open this event. I'm really sorry that we're not meeting in a pub in London, but never mind, perhaps that's for the future. Train strikes, damn it, I'm going to have to go fairly soon because I've got to get into London, because tonight I'm together with the silver and gold winners of the Teaching Awards. And I absolutely have to get there because that's a wonderful event which celebrates, just as we're doing now, the contribution that our colleagues make to our classrooms, to our schools, across the system, making education the best it can be. And I'm going to make no apologies. I'm going to finish with a quote from Malala, who said, "One child, one teacher, one pen, and one book can change the world." Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you so much, Alison. Just utterly, utterly inspiring words. And I loved what you said about dispositions. And yes, you know, yeah, I feel incredibly proud to be part of this community. And what really touched me was at the end where you said that we work together to ensure that we create a safe space in which everyone is heard and everyone feels like their voice is heard and they are able to say what they need to. And that's what I'd love to see rolling out into every single school across the land, because I truly believe that, like, you know, like you've said, it would change the face of education. I love the work that the Charter College is doing. And, you know, yeah, so thank you so much, Alison, for being here. Now, I can't believe I'm looking at the screen. I can see my mummy. My mummy's over there. Mummy, give a wee wave. and my sister all the way from Australia, which is amazing. And then there's just, my husband, but then I'm looking at my work colleagues, my poor teaching assistant who puts up with me Monday to Friday, was made to come on this call. God bless him. So he's here. I've got friends, but actually, it's just amazing seeing so many people that I have connected with through the virtual world of Twitter. That's what's amazing. I can't believe that I've met all of you and that so many of you have come along the journey. Some of you, many of you, I've never actually met in real life, which is bizarre. We worked on a book together, but I've never actually met you face to face. Now, what we're going to do now, and, sort of gird your loins, Tinies, here we go, is we are going to talk through the book. And what we're going to do is I'm going to bring various people on to talk about their part. So the book, if you haven't seen it yet, it looks like this, but it is split into different sections. So here we go. We are starting off with the very, very first section, which is called Being That Teacher. Now, it's a fabulous section because you know yourself. If you think back to when you were at school, you probably have that teacher in your mind. At the end of the podcast, I always say, who would be your perfect teacher? And a number of you often say people who have taught you. So you've had that perfect teacher, but this first section is about being that teacher. And I'm really excited that both Sheila and Verity are going to come on and talk about it. So Sheila, can you come on first? Come on down. I used to love that program. It's really
Hello,
good.
I'm here.
Right.
Hi.
Hey, hi Sheila. So
Hiya.
for anyone that doesn't know you, Sheila, who is Sheila Mulvaney?
I am currently a trainer, but I in my background, I've been a nurse, a health visitor, a teacher, and been head of the Virtual School for Children in Care in about 5 different local authorities. Do people know what a Virtual School for Children in Care is?
Why don't you tell us?
Quite a few nods.
Just in case. Yeah.
Back in 2010, the government said they had to have one person in every authority whose job it was to kind of track and monitor and promote the educational achievement of all of the children that were in care or looked after by that local authority. And obviously they are actually mostly attending bricks and mortar schools, so that's why it's a virtual school. And because of a different set of regulations, the belonging regulations, they remain in the care of that authority as long as they are in care. So that authority remains their corporate parents, even if they no longer live in that authority. And then in 2018, the role was extended. So it wasn't just children in care, it was children that were in care and had previously been in care. So adopted children, children on special guardianship orders, that kind of thing. And then more recently, they now have a remit, I think it's for a strategic overview of all of the children that have a social worker, which of course is an immense and quite floating population. So that is a virtual school.
Thank you. Now, you wrote about trauma-informed practice, knowing, then doing. So what inspired you to write about that, Sheila?
Well, I suppose being head of a virtual school in lots of authorities, seeing lots of schools practice, and I have to say, lots of school practice is very good. I go into lots of schools doing training and I feel very privileged because a lot are very trauma informed, even if it's in an intuitive way, and attachment aware. They are compassionate and kind and accept that not every child walks through the door kind of in the right place to learn, and they're prepared to put things in place to get them to that point where they can learn. But I suppose my real drive is the schools that don't respond like that, and sadly I've seen quite a few of those, where my feeling is children are often punished or sanctioned for things that genuinely aren't their fault. You know, if a child is in care, and it's about a much bigger group of students, not just the children in care, that much bigger group that we describe as vulnerable, the chances are they haven't had kind of the right beginning to be like their peers. So they might not have had their attachment needs met sufficiently enough to be able to regulate themselves and soothe themselves, because we learn how to regulate our emotions through co-regulating first with adults. And if we hadn't had enough opportunity to do that, then they can't. And some children, because they've experienced traumas or adversity in their early life, will respond to different situations in what appears from the outside to be quite an over-the-top way, again because they can't manage their emotions, and they often feel quite frightened. I think fear is quite an ever-present feeling for a lot of these children that have experienced, you know, adversity and trauma. So my feeling was, I think a lot of teachers, the vast majority of staff that work in school want to help and support teachers. Help and support children. They just sometimes don't know the best way to do it. And when you're faced every day with a child who is causing challenge for you, it can become quite easy to focus on the behaviour. Whereas my view would be, we need to focus on the emotions behind that behaviour. If I could give a little example, if I had a horrible day at work, which rarely happens for me, because I love what I do and I'm very privileged, and I was to walk into the house and kind of slam the door behind me and sort of throw my bag down, if my husband was to say, excuse me, can you go out and come in again, because that's not the way we enter this house, you can imagine what the result would be. You know, because I want him to say, gosh, are you okay? What's going on? Not focus on the behavior, focus on what is making her act like that. Because I'm not a diva, I don't generally. And I think the same is true for children. So often we focus on the behavior, and obviously if a child is hurting themselves or hurting another child, we have to. But other than that, we need to be thinking, what's causing this? What's the emotion behind this? And how can we help them deal with that emotion so that they can manage their behavior? I can go on.
Yeah, no, as I was just reading Sarah's comment, which is so clearly explained, and it really is, Sheila, because yeah, that makes so much sense, doesn't it? And your chapter, I think, is incredibly impactful and really enables people to understand what we should be doing in order to support and help those children.
Yes, and I think one of the things that I fear a bit is when I hear that schools have these kind of, I mean, I think it's kind of branded as zero tolerance. Well, I mean, we never tolerate children hurting, do we? I mean, that's it's a given. But I think what that sometimes means is we have a policy and we apply it to everybody. And my view is context always counts. And I'll just give you one example who actually wasn't a looked after child, he was a young carer. And every day, he was in a secondary school, but in the remit I had for virtual school, I also had, an overview for the young carers. The school knew he was a young carer. And every day before he came to school, it was a secondary school, he would get his younger siblings sorted for school. He would make a sandwich for mum who had very significant mental health problems. And he would also have to sort the uniform for him and his little brother. And then he'd set off, drop the brother at school, and then come into school. And one day, of course, he came in wearing trainers. Now, trainers, it's not in the uniform to wear trainers, I get that. But of course, he was greeted by, let's say, one of the not so compassionate members of staff. And I can imagine what you must feel like as a 14-year-old, having done that before you turned up to school. So of course, he just turned around and went home and didn't come back, actually, for quite a few days. And you think, actually, context counts. And the school knew he was a young carer. All they needed to do was say, how great to see you. Oh, I know you're wearing I noticed you've got your trainers on. And then engage in a dialogue. And there could be so many different outcomes that would, still have been effective in terms of managing what's happened, but actually so much more supportive from him than sending him home. Yeah. So I do believe that whatever your policy, context has to count, and it needs to be individualized to meet the needs of your very individual students.
It really does. And just looking at the messages that have been put there, Bookie has said behavior has meaning. It really does. We have to look beyond the behavior and actually look at what it actually means. And then John has said, I always teach children that you are not your behavior. Yeah, and Nina says, behind all behavior, there's a coded message often telling us that the world of the child is not okay. Absolutely. And thank you so much.
No, that's fair enough. Yeah.
No, you carry on. No, you carry on.
Well, I was just going to say one other thing, that I think there is a big responsibility for leadership here. You have not only teachers in your school, you have teaching assistants who are wonderful, but often they don't get the training of others. And I think they need an understanding. They need to be not. I think it really robs professionals of professionalism when they're told, if this happens, you must do this. If this happens, you must do this. Because I think context always counts. And of course, relationships are central. So the people in the classroom are usually the people that know the children the best. And they need to be able to make, I think, some professional judgments. And I just want to say thank you to you, Toria, for pulling this all together. Must have been a huge amount of work, but thank you for letting our voices be heard.
Thank you so much, Sheila. And thank you for being part of the Tiny Voices Talk book. And I'm now going to move on to Verity Saunders. So Verity, unmute yourself and come on. And for anyone that doesn't know Verity, who is Verity Saunders?
I'm just me. I'm just me. I'm just a person. I'm a mum, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend, I'm a teacher, I'm a colleague, and definitely I'm very much a bit bonkers. What you see is what you get. That's all I can say. I'm just me.
Yes. She does ask a load of questions, just so for anyone in the audience that has not spent time with Verity. Oh my goodness!
I can see Oliver laughing. I can see Bronte laughing.
Everyone that knows her is nodding because I've never met anyone that asks quite so many questions. So let's talk, Verity, about your chapter. Now, your chapter was Batons of Discovery. So talk us through it for anyone that doesn't know.
Okay, I was never, ever, ever going to be a teacher, and everybody in my family kept telling me how opinionated I was, how chatty I was, how bossy I was, and that I was going to be a teacher. My dad had been a secondary school teacher before going off into a different career when I was 5, and there was no way on this planet that I was going to be a teacher. I wanted to be a doctor from a very, very early age. I wanted to be a doctor, and I'm not one of those naturally gifted people. I have to work hard to get what I want, and that was my driving force through school. I worked hard because I wanted to go to medical school, and lots of my family kept saying, why don't you be a nurse? I didn't want to be a nurse, I wanted to be a doctor. My mum was a nurse, my gran was a nurse, my cousins were nurses. I wanted to be a doctor. And then my heart got broken when my chemistry teacher at 16 told me that I wasn't clever enough. I just couldn't grasp it. I asked lots of questions, funny that, because I wanted to know the how, I wanted to know the why, I wanted to understand the reasoning behind everything for it to make sense to me. And he said, if you just don't get it, you're just not cut out for medicine. And my world was crushed. So, and then I was lost for a little bit, and then I decided that I'd watched a film with my mum and decided that I was going to go the back way into what I wanted to do, because I wanted to go into psychiatry. And I watched a film and they were interviewing a clinical psychologist, and I said to my mum, that is what I want to do, that is what I want to do. So I then took a different direction and I started retraining. So I did my degree, and I started training to be a clinical psychologist, and life bits and pieces happened. And honestly, there was an epiphany when one day I woke up and I'd been volunteering with adults with learning needs in a halfway house, and I just knew I was going to train to be an early years teacher. I just knew. So I applied for my teaching 3 months after the deadline. I got called for an interview a week later on my birthday, and then 24 hours later I was offered a post on teacher training. And here I am in my 20th year, having taught 4, 5 and 6 year olds for 20 years and indoctrinating them that it is okay to ask questions.
Oh, sorry, I muted myself there. No, and it is okay. So, and I think that's what's so lovely about you, Verity, because you do ask multiple questions, but actually it is so important that we get our young people to ask questions, and that, you know, and you do embody that sort of getting people to use their voice, because you do ask us lots and lots of questions, and it's impossible to be quiet around you because you do. And I can imagine being in your class is such a privilege, because actually you're continually asking your little people what they think, and you know, you're getting them to speak. So tell us about the batons very briefly.
I think I learned so much about myself that I wanted to pass on to the children, that it's okay to get knocked down. I think the pandemic has really impacted on resilience amongst many other things. And one thing that I found is the need to explicitly teach resilience, and to show children that it's okay not to get it right, or to not do things how they initially wanted it to do, that you can go, as Bronte would say, the long way round, and to just keep going, to have that fight, to know that if that's what you want, then you are enough to go and get it. They need to know themselves. I think so many children and adults don't know themselves, and Matt talks about knowing yourself and being the authentic you, and that's a really big thing to know, and it's something that I've had to rediscover recently. There's been a lot going on in my life, and it's been really good to just reground myself and be happy and know who I am, and to keep going and fighting for what I believe. And I want to put that, I want the children to know that each and every one of them is special. They've got something that nobody else on the planet has. They are them, and they are special, and they need to be celebrated, whatever it is they can do, and whatever it is that they choose, what they choose to do. I want to be that teacher that children remember. And I heard my head say a few months ago, he was showing people around, and they came into my classroom, and it's never dull in my classroom, as you can probably imagine. And it made my day, and I'm clinging on to this when I heard him as he shut the door, showing a new cohort around, and he said, "Yes, that's Mrs. Saunders." The children tend to remember their year with her.
Oh, I love that, Verity. I really do. And, you know, I think the reason why you're in that being that teacher sort of bit is because you do embody that being that teacher. That's, you know, you give the children those memories. So thank you. Now, moving on to the next section is teaching, because we couldn't really put together a teaching book without actually covering teaching. That would have been a little challenging. But what I love about the book is the fact that actually, I'll show it to you again, just in case you've forgotten what it looked like, that it actually is early years to higher education people that are writing in it. Now, I'm joined today by, well, there are 4 of them. So we'll start off with Kim Peacock, who is early years. Where are you, Kim? Come to the forefront.
Am I here? Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you. Yeah, I can see you too.
Go.
Now,
Wonderful.
Kim, for anyone that doesn't know you, who is Kim Peacock?
A multitasker, and wear of many hats. I basically teach early years a couple of days a week. I'm a deputy head on a Friday, a mum to a 4-year-old, so I'm totally starting the school experience again with her. I've got a 13-year-old son who with me as a taxi, so a multitasker. That's what
you truly are.
Toria?
Yes, your microphone's going in and out every so often, but we heard most of that. But you wrote about the why in EYFS. Now, I know that you are a passionate early years teacher, and you and I have talked often about early years and also the misconceptions from others about early years, and your chapter very much looks at that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's really, it is all about the why, and I've really embraced the 4 principles of EYFS: the positive relationships, the learning environment, and the teaching and learning. And if you embrace all that, that's when you get to know the unique child. But it talks about how you can also use those principles to the workforce, the staff, and the wider school. And we've taken some of that into Key Stage 1 and beyond, because it isn't just about knowing your children and your and that it's about their families, how your staff are supporting them, how the senior leadership team are supporting it. And it's about knowing what is your motivation, and what works in my setting might not work in your setting. It might not even work in another setting down the road for me. It works for our children in that moment at that time with those staff. So it's about really unpicking and getting to the nitty gritty of why we do what we do. And yes, we play, but we play for a reason. Does that make sense? And sometimes there is this misconception that we just play. And so it's all about unpicking why we play and how we play and the rationale behind it. And my staff get sick of me asking the question, why are we doing that? I don't mind why we're doing it, as long as we know the reason why we're doing it. So that's what this chapter is about understanding your why, and how sometimes they can be spontaneous decisions that are made, and how sometimes it's part of a long-term strategy. So there you go.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as I say, I know you and I have talked about this so often, and one of the things you say is ask your EYFS team what research and pedagogy inspires their practice, and of course why, because actually it is research and pedagogy that is at the very heart of what you're doing, isn't it?
Yeah, and if you walked around our setting, we my team, this is AEYFS, I'm not a single, we're very much a team. We're like magpies, we take bits from all over. You'd walk through our setting, you'd see a bit of Alice Bryce Clegg, you'd see a bit of, we've just been reading Julia Fisher and how about interacting and interfacing. We've been doing some Greg Bottrell. So it is literally a magpie of things and different philosophies, pick bits that are pertinent to what we at this given time for our children. So particularly at the minute, we've done a lot of research linked to the UNICEF. Children have come in with low physical development this year.
Oh wow, okay, that makes complete sense. I missed that last bit, but I think what you said, you've done a lot of work to do with UNICEF because a lot of your children have come in with lower physical development. Is that right?
Yes, that's spot on. That is spot on, Toria.
No, it's really interesting. As you say, actually, if the principals of early years went up through the school, that would be really powerful, because often they just sit in the early year classroom, and that's really what you're all about, isn't it? Moving those principles beyond the early year classroom.
Particularly off the back of the pandemics, if you invest in those things like the new unique child, like the positive relationships, like the enabling environments, and then that the teaching and learning comes as part of that, does that and they underpin everything. And if you don't get those foundations and that love of learning writing foundation and EYFS, that's what starts the whole journey up for those children as they go through school. So it's about activating those children. And to be fair, I'm only one part of the journey. They've come from some fabulous feeder settings, and the work that they've done, does that make sense? But it's about working together.
Yeah,
because they learn
absolutely.
so much.
Thank you so much, Kim. And I'm now going to move on to Pauline, who has just put her video on. So, hi, Pauline. For anyone that hasn't come across you, Pauline, who is Pauline Sterling?
Okay, now the reason why I put my camera off, some of you are aware, I don't know if you can see her. I have a little puppy next to me here. So that's why the camera was off, in case I had to suddenly run off after her, although she's been very good. So I'm now retired, well, semi-retired. I'm a qualifications manager for an awarding body now, part-time. I retired from teaching 4 years ago. I taught for 32 years. Initially, I taught French and German for many, many years, with a bit of English and a bit of maths in between. And then, because anybody that knows me knows I'm passionate about global links, global learning. And at my last school, I started there as teacher of French and maths. And then somehow, because I can manage to get global links into anything really, because I managed to get the global links in, I ended up being head of citizenship, which also brought in the PSHE. And so for the last 4 years before I retired, I was head of citizenship and PSHE, which was a very interesting one, because PSHE, of course, is taught all the way through. And actually, everybody's a teacher of PSHE, even if they're not a form teacher. Primary, everybody's a teacher of PSHE. But I ended up in this situation where I was overall in charge of PSHE, but I was managing the staff that were teaching it. And I realized that people had all sorts of reasons. Some absolutely loved it and were really engaged and brought their own resources in and thought it was a really important part of their job. Some, not so many, to be fair, so I didn't think it was very important, but there were quite a few that were worried about it and worried about getting it right and not knowing whether they were going to give the wrong advice. So this is where my chapter came from, really, was the tips on how to make PSHE work. As soon as I retired, funnily enough, in my last year, I was approached by Hodder Education to review a course book that they were bringing out for Key Stage 5. And I reviewed it and they said, oh, have you had any writing experience? Well, I have actually. In my sort of second or third year of teaching, I wrote a French textbook and I've written various other things. So I ended up revising the Key Stage, the Explore PSHE at Key Stage 3, which taught me a lot actually about PSHE. Even though I was writing it, it taught me a lot about PSHE and brought me up to date in a lot of things. But that was where the 10 tips came from teaching PSHE in a large secondary school, and actually a faith school as well, where there was all sorts of other issues and bringing PSHE in. And this idea that you don't have to be an expert, and it's quite okay to tell the learners that you're not an expert. You don't know every drug on the street, or, there's lots of things that you won't know and you wouldn't be expected to know. But it's also, I think, the main part of teaching PSHE is making it a safe environment for your learners, to make sure that they're happy to speak their mind. They know how to voice their opinion respectfully, and that they know that you're there to listen to them. It's not always possible to say, to be there at the end of a lesson to listen to anything that learners have to say. I know that, because one lot goes out and another lot comes in, but it's good. It's really important, if you've brought up issues that might affect some learners, for them to know that you're there to signpost them often, rather than, you're not going to have the answers, but you might be able to tell them where they can find the answers. But as I say, it's that safe environment, and then it should work. It's getting the balance that right there, really, to be, as I say, be respectful, listen to others, but to make sure that your learners come along and feel that their tiny voice is heard. I guess everybody has the same rights within the classroom.
Absolutely. I love that, Pauline. And I just am going to read the very end of your chapter, because it says personal social health education can be and needs to be done well. It's too important not to approach it with the same seriousness as any other aspect of the curriculum. And when you do that, it reveals opportunities for truly memorable educational experiences, the sort you won't get from a pile of vaguely embarrassing handouts. So thank you so much, Pauline, for your chapter, which covered a subject that I think sometimes can be seen as less important, but is absolutely vital, to our children and their development. Now I'm moving on to Melanie Gentles. So welcome, Melanie.
Hello, hi, lovely to be here.
This is the first time I've spoken to you, Melanie. It's super exciting.
It's very exciting, yes. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's so lovely to have you here. So, Melanie, for anyone that doesn't know who you are, who is Melanie Gentles?
Okay, that's always one of those questions, isn't it? As Verity said, just me, I'm me, little me. It's, given this context, I am a teacher, senior leader, I'm a positive mental health lead at my school, and I've got a strong passion in everything EDI, equity, diversity and inclusion. And when you say, who am I? Well, I have been on a journey discovering who I am aside from my teacher hat, and that's what led me to writing the piece in Tiny Voices Talk. Yeah, I think I was in education, along the senior leadership route, and I even had my head teacher, deputy head, saying, you need to look to be a deputy head, even putting jobs underneath my nose, not as though they wanted to get rid of me or anything, but it's time. And I just thought, you know what, I'm not sure that's actually what I want to do. So I studied psychology as an undergraduate degree, and I literally just stumbled upon positive psychology. I don't know if everyone here is familiar with positive psychology, but I stumbled upon it and I thought, you know what, I like the sound of that. And the fact that traditional psychology talks about what's wrong with you, whereas positive psychology is really looking at flourishing where we are now and to be a even better version of ourselves. And I thought, you know what, that sounds great. I could use that in education, bring it to the children. I love being with the children. I'm passionate about being with them, teaching them, and I don't want to lose that. So I started on my positive education and positive psychology journey, found out that I've got a love of learning. You know, I really want the best for the future, and I know we can work towards this. So yeah, that was a journey of mine. And then within positive psychology, I discovered positive education. And I thought, yeah, this is what I'm looking for. And do jump in if I'm just rambling on here.
No, I'm quite happy. You're doing a grand job. I was gonna sort of punctuate every so often with a question, but no need. I'm sitting back and just listening. You crack on.
Yeah, so positive education, and it's based around a framework of a wellbeing theory called PERMA, developed by Martin Seligman. And one of, the pillars are positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. And when I was looking at this module, and especially engagement, character strengths came out. And I started thinking about the character strengths of some of the children that I teach, and especially the children who I teach maths to. And I teach maths to the struggling children, and they're year threes, and they find maths difficult, extremely difficult. And I came across this concept called flow. I finally had a name for being in the zone. You know, when you say to children, you're in the zone or you're on fire, I found out there was actually scientific research behind this, and it was called flow. And it just made me think of, you know, the differentiation behind it. So we're getting that right level of challenge for the children, so they feel as though they can achieve. I mean, I've written about it. I've got a double maths lesson. It's 90 minutes with 7-year-olds who, yeah, exactly. And, you know, I'd have to give them not even brain breaks. We'd go out and have a separate break alongside brain breaks, because they just, you know, struggled with it, as did I. And they'd ask me, you know, when's the end of the lesson? Are we nearly there? Then all of a sudden, the lesson just disappeared in front of us. And I said to them, that's flow. We've just experienced flow. And they were like, what's that, Miss Gentles? And I explained it to them, and just seeing them achieve in that way and understanding that, yeah, I've just got the lesson right. It's, you know, just right for them, that differentiation. They're making choices for themselves. They believe in themselves. They really do. And I mean, so much so, even this week, we have an initiative called Chalk and Chat, where children go along to talk about something that might be bothering them at the moment. And the teacher asked them to bring along something that shows their strengths. And one of my children, she took her maths book along, and I just thought, oh, wow, that it just really touched my heart. Yeah, and that was just this week. Yes.
That's amazing. Oh, I love that story, because I think, you know, I also teach the little mathematicians that find it slightly more tricky. And you're right, when they it's about building up their confidence, it's about helping them to realize and actually that the flow is so vital to that lesson. It really is, Melanie. And Melanie's chapter is called Going with the Flow, and very much talks about that positive psychology and how to create that within your classroom. So yeah, thank you so much, Melanie, for contributing, and I'm so grateful that you did.
Thank you.
Now, our final person that's talking about their chapter within the teaching is Sarah Hepworth. So where are you, Sarah? Is she here? Oh, I can see her, but I can't hear her. I can't hear your voice.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes. Yes, I can.
Well, I was given a really fancy microphone by my husband, and I said, "Oh, dare I try it today?" And obviously, it didn't work. So there we go.
No, well, it is so great to have you here, Sarah. And I wonder if you could tell everyone who hasn't come across you who Sarah Hepworth is.
Okay, so this is really daunting, this question, isn't it? I feel like sat here and listened to so many amazing people already. So I'm obviously Sarah, and I have been teaching for over 10 years. I'm a leader with many different hats. I'm associate leader at Derby Research School, which actually, Toria, I think I had the confidence to go for once I'd heard about getting into your book. So I kind of have you to thank for that. Yes, which is great. I am also an English leader, a specialist English leader. I'm an Open University Reading for Pleasure lead. What else? I am a word aware trainer. So yeah, many different hats.
Truly many different hats. Now, Sarah, you wrote a chapter called Curious Learners in Creative Ways. What inspired that?
So I was also, I feel like all of the contributors and yourself, we all have lots in common. I ask a lot of questions. I like to be curious. As I've been listening, I'm like, that could be me. And when I was at school, all my A levels were all about kind of curious things. So I did like psychology, sociology, philosophy and ethics, and I loved to kind of had my interest peaked. I still like being hooked. I like obviously books that do that, films, all that kind of creative element. And I think starting my teaching career off in Key Stage 1 really helped that really start off. When I first started teaching, I wasn't sure what year group I wanted. And I had a placement in Key Stage 1, and my mentor at the time said, "Well, of course, Sarah, you were made for Key Stage 1. You're just that kind of bubbly energy for it." And then as I moved into Key Stage 2, I thought, well, all these things that I kind of loved about Key Stage 1 and having the role play, the curiosity, being able to be whoever I wanted to be every single day, I could still take that into Key Stage 2. It didn't stop. And I think that's kind of where this really inspired me to write this. And then obviously I wrote in my chapter about kind of the response from the pandemic and how children had missed their imagination and that curiosity. And that's what really inspired me to write it at this time, how we had a real need, I think, for our children to be grabbed and have that attention caught straight away. And that's kind of what inspired me this time.
So I forgot to unmute there.
What?
Sorry. I love that. I really do. And I think curiosity is absolutely vital to actually build up. And it links in so importantly with what we're talking about, which is developing that voice, developing the voice of the learner, which I think, I don't know about you, Sarah, but I've noticed a significant change since the pandemic. You know, I think I was talking to a friend about this, a colleague about this the other day, that pre-pandemic teaching and post-pandemic teaching are different beasts because the children are very different now that they have come in. And I don't know if you've noticed that.
Absolutely. And that's, you know, as a school, we decided to respond to that by bringing in an immersive environment. So you enter into our Year 4 area now, and currently we're in the middle of an Explorer topic, and we've got Jungle Vines down and that kind of almost role play, but blown up on a much bigger scale. And our children needed it because they needed the extra stimulation, I think, and the imagination, which was creating that curiosity for them. But absolutely, now I've got Year 4 as well at the moment, and I feel like they need that slightly younger approach perhaps to teaching. I feel like to some extent I'm teaching almost a Year 2 class sometimes, because they need the extra things that, you know, for whatever reason in lockdown, those 2 years of missed early years learning, we need to provide it in other ways in Key Stage 2. So I absolutely agree. We've had to, even more so, I think creating curiosity in that creative way is even more relevant at this moment in time.
Yeah, I was talking to Jeff about this the other day, the fact that what I notice about children currently is that they are nervous of moving away and discovering things for themselves in case they get it wrong. There is a reluctance to do that in the way that there wasn't so much pre-pandemic. And I do think the only factor I can blame it on is the pandemic. If you're out there and you're teaching a class, nod your head if you agree, because I'm just, yeah. or head or whatever. Yeah, because I think there is a significant difference. But I think, Sarah, that's why I love your chapter, because it is about giving children those opportunities to be curious. So thank you so much for contributing your chapter. And I'm so pleased that it inspired you to move on and up in your career.
Thank you for choosing me.
Now, Sharifa Lee, this is your moment. Now, Sharifa is phenomenal. Anyone that hasn't come across her. Sharifa and I met in a virtual staff room in the midst of COVID in 2020. And we got to know each other then. She was, as I said earlier, the very first guest on the Tiny Voice Talks podcast. And she has been a wonderful, wonderful supporter of the Tinies. And yeah, did a pre-publication review of the book. So Sharifa, I'm handing over to you.
Can I just say, number one, I know so many of you on this call, and I'm just so delighted that a lot of you contributed to this wonderful book. So I will hold up the book. There you go. I have my copy of the book. But I didn't get the memo to dress up. I don't have my beautiful dress. And I'll tell you what I was doing before this, because in a sense, I was quite pleased that we had trained strikes in men that I could go to school and look after the school chickens. So that was where I was literally before this. And so I've got this old jumper and my jeans are covered in brown gunk. I think it's mud. I hope it's mud is all I can say. So apologies for the way I look. I am just delighted to be here. I'm delighted to know Toria. We have not met in real life, IRL. It's still virtual, but I think, we call ourselves twinnies, really. We are twins. We're born in the same year. She keeps telling me that I'm slightly older than she is.
She is slightly older than I am, everyone. She is, definitely.
Toria, I hope you don't mind. It's been a meeting of minds and meeting of hearts, and we have gone through so much. And you're right, we met during, literally sort of the early stage of the pandemic. It was all virtual, and then we started connecting to so many of you on this call right now, including the lovely Alison as well. I'm going to come back to what Alison said later on. But this book is just, it's astonishing what you have accomplished, because, without your drive and without your vision, there would not be this collection of voices. And it started small. We had conversation after conversation about how we would, or you, not me, I'm just there as your support, really, amplify voices of teachers and educators, because your voice matters. I think Alison said about this as well. There are so many macho voices. Now, I like the word macho, because in my mind, I know what that looks, and I think it's fascinating, and it's slightly depressing to me as well, because their voices seem so large and everyone seems to listen to that and follow that, and it becomes about conformity. And I don't think teaching is about that at all. And there's so many of you who think you've got tiny voices, but the impact you make is so huge. It is unseen every single day. I do not want to spoil her thunder, but I do have the wonderful Caitlin, who moved herself 200 miles down south to be in my school and be part of my team. And she contributed to this. And her chapter is on a different kind of golden thread. I think I'm going to pronounce it. It's called Kintsugi. Is that right? Did I say it right? Thank you, Caitlin. I can see you nodding. Because I think now, the message out there in the teaching profession is a different kind of golden thread. It's the golden thread of conformity. And I think, Alison, that's what I think you were alluding to as well. It's a golden thread that's supposed to start in the early years and filter through right up to HE and FE as well. But it's about, to me, uniformity. It's a different kind of thread. Yes, it does bind us, but it also doesn't release us. I don't think it empowers us. And I think this book is something different. It's a different kind of golden thread. It's a collective of voices, and it's a collection. And I think we know, and most of us are part of different organizations and part of different unions, part of the Chartered College or whatever it is, because united we stand stronger. And I think we're being faced now with some things that Toria has said, and some of you have alluded to as well, post-pandemic, and now with the cost of living crisis, with the energy crisis and everything else, we're being faced with things that none of us have faced with in this generation. We are responding to things that, you know, we have never considered before, because life was just all right. It was just all right. And now it's not all right. And all of you see that in your different settings, your different classes, in your different schools and organizations. And the way we need to respond is not through uniformity, it is definitely through compassion. It's definitely through listening to diverse voices. It's about a different kind of kintsugi. Now, Caitlin, I think what you have highlighted is our society, and we know this, is broken in a variety of different ways, but what binds us is actually a thread that glues those broken pieces together and makes us stronger. Caitlin is going to talk, hopefully, I certainly hope so, that she's going to talk about some other voices in the past that have inspired her to be who she is today. I had some of those voices, but I also had, and the opposite of what Toria said, a teacher who did the opposite to me. Unfortunately, she did not inspire me. She did the complete opposite. And I knew since I was a really young girl that I will be a teacher, because my parents were teachers, and sometimes we come from teaching families, and we sort of they were my inspiration. But I wasn't what you would define as a good child. In fact, perhaps in some of our schools, I'll be the complete opposite. I was the naughty child for whatever the reason was, and I can't quite remember. But this teacher did not trust in me, did not believe in me. My voice as a learner was not heard. And she was, and this was in primary school, she was my teacher for 3 years in a row. Can you just imagine? And I feel quite sorry for her, because I think I was a thorn in her side, but I don't think she saw me. She did not listen to me. She did not get to know me. In fact, one day she fell ill for about a period of time, I think about 2 weeks or whatever it is. And I was really young. I must have been about 8 or 9. And we had what we call back in Singapore a relief teacher, a supply teacher, basically. And she came in and she read the register, and she came to my name and she said, "Oh, you are the Sharifa. You have made your teacher ill." And I'm, you know, the shock and horror of an 8-year-old thinking, what have I done? I was just trying to be me. Now, probably I had my own additional needs. And Toria and I, we've talked about some of our invisible disability, Toria. And you actually refer to that in your book. And thank you so much for showing the courage to talk about some of the things that impact on your health. And I've got that since I was young as well. You know, it's something that people can't see, but my teacher did not get to know me. But the voices I hear today so far, and I'm sure it is again that thread in the book, you listen. You use your voices, yes, but all of you listen, you see, you care, and that's where we have to be, and that's where we have to carry on. We create little legacies along the way, and again, I know it's about Caitlin again. Caitlin, you know, you are now creating your own legacy because of what others have done for you. You now create it for others. It'll be the same for all of us in our different settings, our own different way. And our voices do have power. It has the power to empower. And I think this is why this book is just so powerful. I think it's a book that you can read cover to cover, and I must say, I'm going to own up, I haven't read it cover to cover, apart from, of course, when I reviewed the bits that Toria did right, but I have dipped in and out, and this is one of those books that you can dip in and out whenever you need it. I think it's got the power to bind, the power to hold, the power to support. And just one last thing, I am absolutely thrilled, Tori, that your family's here, because it's as if they are my family. I've heard so much about your mum and your daughter and your husband and the things that you all have gone through collectively. I know I'm waving to you as well, Toria's mum. I'm just in love with all of you, Toria's family, of course, but all of you here as well. And thank you so much for having me. Absolute delight. So thank you. I hope I haven't sort of taken too much of the time here.
No, you truly haven't. Sharifa, you know I adore you. You know, we are peas in a pod, we truly are. And every time you speak, I go, yes, 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 that's why, everyone, our episodes were called Chatterbox, because basically we weren't quiet together. We just talked and talked and talked and talked and talked. But I think what you said resonates with me so much, Sharifa. I'm so sorry you had that teacher. I also, you know, wrote about that teacher in my book, because one of the reasons I became a teacher is because I didn't have the teacher that I wanted. I didn't have the lovely teacher. I had a lot of experiences, really, of teachers that weren't incredibly nice. And I wanted to be a teacher so that I could try and make a difference. And I think that's so important. And I know that, you know, for you, that's so vital as well. And I love what you do. I love what you say. And thank you so much for
Absolutely. No, not
supporting
at
it.
all. We collectively have the power to make or to break, which do we choose every single
Yes.
day.
Yeah, we really do. As someone said to me the other day, we make the weather in our classroom. And that is so true. You know, if we go in and we're in a foul mood, we have, you know, we can actually affect the lives of 30 little people that day, you know, and that, yeah. Now, I just want to say, I know other people are on this call that already have contributed to the parts I've talked about. So I'm just going to read you out the names of the chapters that I haven't talked about yet, which was Dr. Claire Campbell talks about self-esteem, Gemma Clark talks about period education, Emma Courtney talks about being that champion, Debbie Ferguson talks about the power of light bulb moment, Liz Stevenson talks about transfer, it's not what you think. And then we would go on to, I've covered those. Chris Connaughton talks about storytelling and the importance of storytelling. And Nick Stewart talks about one of my favourite chapters, actually, because I really didn't know much about it till I read it, which was understanding schemata in 5 quotes. Now we are moving on to inclusion, and I've got 2 of our inclusion contributors to talk to, but I want to read you out what we covered in this inclusion part, because actually for me, inclusion is vital. We do not have children that are carbon copies of each other. We have children who are individuals and need to be recognised for the individuals they are. We need to meet their needs, and we need to understand who they are and where they come from, and not who we think they are and not what we think they need. We need to listen, and I think that's absolutely vital. And I'm going to do a little plug for a book that's coming out called Square Pegs, because actually it really talks about those children, and I've just read it and I cried a lot, because it is so important that we are recognizing those children in our system. We haven't written a whole book about it, but we do have some really powerful chapters that talk about really meeting the needs of children that are diverse. We talk about SEND, we talk about forced families, we talk about LGBTQIA+, we talk about moving beyond the label, we talk about you know, being a neurodivergent teacher or teaching assistant, we talk about well-being, and finally we talk about the impact of racism and disability. And I think those chapters are incredibly powerful, and I hope informative, and move people's understanding on, so we are meeting the needs of the children. Okay, I'm off the soapbox now, everyone. So now we're going on to Penny Whelan, who is a Senko. So Penny, could you come on down? I have just ruined the first bit though. Who are you? So you might just need to pretend I didn't say that, Penny. So just go for it and ignore the fact I just said that. So who is Penny Whelan?
So I'm a Senko. I have a variety of hats. So I'm a Senko, that's probably my main role. I'm an assistant head, I'm the EAL coordinator. I'm in charge of the linking network for the schools in Luton, and I work 3 days a week. And then I'm at home 2 days with my little boy as well. So yeah, lots of hats.
Now, you wrote your chapter, which is 9 reasons to love your Senko. So talk to me about why you wrote that, apart from me saying to you, we really need to know more about being a Senko.
A lot of it was you, Tori, actually, was talking to you and doing the podcast with you. Because after we do the podcast, she said, I really want to talk to you about being a Senko, because most people don't really know what a Senko does. So, you know, let's have a conversation conversation about it. I think when I took on the role, I probably didn't know what Asenko did either, but I agreed to it. And I think I've done a lot of learning on the job. So I think for me, it's been a journey of discovery all the way through. And when I started the role, it was one that I agreed to basically because no one else in the school wanted to do it. And I'm quite good at paperwork. I'm quite organised. So I thought, well, yeah, I can do that. And it's evolved. The more I've actually, been in the role, the longer I've been in the role, the more I've understood it. And I don't think anyone understands your job or your life if they're not living it themselves. So it's important for for people to understand the roles of the people in their schools, because you can't say you might stomp around the school saying you're really busy, but actually everyone's busy. They're all just doing different things. So I think from the conversations we had about what Asenko really does, I felt it was important to try and explain it to people and to let people know that you're not just sat, and Kate will know this as well because we've had lots of conversations about it. So Kate's in one of the Asenko DM groups with me as well, and I think people think you're sat in your office all the time and you're just, I don't know what they think we're doing really, but it's a lot of paperwork, but it's a really strategic role, and it can be really tough and it can be really lonely sometimes as well. So it was just a conversation around that really.
Yeah, and I think I was really conscious, where I had worked in leadership previously, I was very conscious that I did know what Asenko was doing, but the others didn't. And I just feel sometimes it's this mysterious role where you disappear off into an office and then you're scurrying around the school and you're very, very, very busy. But actually, people don't necessarily know what you're doing, but your impact is wide and varied, and there is a lot of paperwork. And actually, what I want to touch on is the fact that you, Penny, have really worked hard to empower the voices of Asenko through your DM group, haven't you?
I think, yes. I think when I first started the role, it wasn't something I really knew very much about. It wasn't something that I was overly passionate or enthusiastic about. I've become much more enthusiastic about it as it's gone on. And I thought to myself, if I'm going to do this, I need to be the best. And I'm not the best, but I've got much better at it. So I've worked really hard at, training myself and going on courses and training the other people living in the school, doing lots of work around inclusion. And I think I felt that it was quite a lonely role sometimes at times. So I put a little message on Twitter. Any other Asenkos want to be in a DM group, sort of support. And now there's 4 groups, which are amazing and huge support. And I think people think I started them to support other Asenkos. I didn't. I started them to support me, because I really wanted other people to talk to and to have other people alongside, and to make sure that I was doing the right things and to see what was happening across the rest of the country. And it's become such a huge support for me, and I think for some of them as well. It's just been brilliant. So it's really great to have people across the country that you can talk to about what you're doing and they really get it, and also to share that good practice. And I think that's what Twitter is for, isn't it? It's an amazing platform to be able to share good practice and ideas as well.
Absolutely. And I'm just sort of going to throw this one out there, although I haven't told you we're going to talk about this, Penny, at all. But you are helping me with a new idea that I've had, one of my many new ideas, people, which is we are going to start a Twitter chat thing, aren't we, on a Thursday evening for contributors to, well, you talk about it, Penny, because you can probably put it in better words than me. My idea.
Okay, yes. So Toria's idea. So what Toria felt she'd quite like to do, or what would be quite nice, is if we gave people the opportunity, the contributors had the opportunity to do a little live chat on Twitter, but not a video, not audio, but just a sort of a text chat, and to talk about their chapters a little bit. So if any of the contributors would like to do that, over about half an hour or so, and it will be questions we'll have thought about before. Oliver, we might be stealing your ideas a little bit from when you do the leaders teams chat, and when we do the new to SLT chat on Sunday evening as well. So it's the same sort of principle, but it'll be with some of the contributors, just so that even some of the people that maybe didn't want to talk today could have their input as well and could talk about it, and we can find out a few more details about people in a non-scary way, hopefully.
Yeah. And Penny has been fabulous, because it was one of the many ideas that I had, and actually I thought, oh, who'd be really good at helping me with this? And I thought, oh, Penny Whelan. So yeah, that we're hoping to do that because, as Penny says, some of you didn't want to talk on here today, and that's absolutely fine, but it's a different way of finding your voice. It's along the Primary Rocks idea and just enables people to come along and talk to you about your chapter and find out a little bit more about what you're talking about. So thank you so much, Penny. And I'm going to move over now to Shelley Cousins. Now, Shelley, you wrote about, oh no, we'll start, I won't ruin that. Oh, who is Shelley Cousins?
Shelley Cousins is a very busy English teacher in a fantastic secondary school in rural Somerset. I'm also head of careers and cultural capital. But actually my main inspiration, if you like, for writing my bit is that I am also a military wife and mum to 3 amazing children. And it shows how long ago I actually wrote my bit, because their ages are not correct anymore. Because when I wrote it, they were what, aged between 5 and 16, and they're now aged between 6 and 17. So they've moved on. But yes, I met my husband 13 years ago now, and all of a sudden life became very, very different. Because military life is quite a challenge. So I wrote my chapter about supporting forces families and children in education, because it's a group that not many people know a huge amount about.
I think you're absolutely spot on. We know when children come in, they are part of force family, whatever, but what I love about your chapter is it gives us more information, and it helps us and it equips us as educators so that we can better meet their needs.
Yeah, they go through periods of separation. They go through moving from one end of the country to another, to even different countries, which is something that will be happening for us in the coming years as well. And it's huge being that new child and trying to adjust when you don't necessarily have your family around you can be a really, really difficult thing. So this time last year we were 2 weeks into a deployment, and from experience of many deployments now, Christmas is truly the worst time of year for a deployed parent to be away. I was thoroughly miserable myself last Christmas, but you had to put on that smile and you had to put on that happy face for your children. And there will be times where we will be in the classroom and we'll be doing Christmas-based activities, and we'll be thinking about all these wonderful things we're going to be doing at Christmas, but it's really difficult when you're missing that key part of your family as well, not necessarily being able to have the contact. If you're lucky, you might get a video chat, but that's not always a thing, and it can be really difficult for the younger ones especially. And just raising that awareness for teaching staff of what it means to be a military family was really important to me.
Absolutely. The other thing that I think is fantastic is the fact that you've signposted us to so many great resources that are out there, that actually there are resources out there. There are things that we can go straight to support us.
Yeah, I'm not expecting people to reinvent the wheel and come up with all this new stuff themselves. If you go to an organisation like the Skip Alliance, for example, they have a teacher's toolkit that can be utilised within a classroom. If we are talking about areas, for us being a Navy family, if you're talking about an area such as Plymouth or Portsmouth, a lot will be known about these schools from the perspective of these military families. But military children can pop up anywhere in the UK. It doesn't just have to be where there is a military base. The families model, the accommodation model is changing, and therefore you will find families, and there might just be one family, and that can be the difficulty. And the Forces Pupil Premium money doesn't really go very far when it's just one child. You're not going to be able to employ a teaching assistant that they might be able to employ in an area where you've got lots of children. So it's the little things that you do, and make sure that pupil premium funding doesn't go into that centralised pot, because it's It's really about the social, emotional support that you can give these children, and it performs a different function. It's not necessarily about narrowing an attainment gap. It's the emotional support that we can give to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're spot on. You know, it's not about that money going into a central pot, because actually that money is dedicated for a reason, you know. And I think, yeah, so really fantastic chapter, Shelley. Thank you so much for giving us more information about, I would say, a group of children that can sometimes become missed, which is why it was so important that we put that into the book.
Very important.
Now, I want to move on to the next part of the book, which is talking about professional and personal development. Now, for me, this is absolutely critical. You know, I really, really strongly believe in our commitment to being professional development, but also personal development. As you know, from the beginning, I am doing my apprenticeship at the moment in coaching and mentoring, and certain members that are on here now will be sick to death of me talking about the ILM things that I've written and my diploma and everything else. I'm waiting my results at the moment. Fingers crossed, everyone. But someone that's already achieved it and has written for the book is Matt Deshane. So come on down, Matt.
Hi, Toria. Hey, everyone.
Hey, Matt. So I haven't stolen too much of your thunder. So who is Matt Deshane?
Okay, well, interesting. That's kind of what my chapter is about. My chapter is called "Who Am I?" and that is what it's about. I spend a lot of my time thinking about that, not a self-indulgent, navel-gazing kind of way, or not so often, but you know. Yeah, my name is Matt Deshane. I am a leadership coach. I work primarily with head teachers, school leaders, and SLTs through models of one-to-one coaching, group coaching, action learning, and I spend an inordinate amount of time on Zoom working with leaders across the country, just supporting them with their leadership journeys and their well-being. And in a previous life, I'm a primary school teacher by profession, so I did the graduate teacher program a number of years ago and worked my way through the teaching profession and became the head of a one-form entry school in Kent, which is where I live. I came out of headship in 2016 and moved into international development, and I worked for a children's charity working between London and Northern India, and I was working in London in Northern India every 6 weeks for 2 weeks, working with tribal schools on the border of Pakistan in northern Gujarat, and did work on pedagogy, supporting school leaders. And then through that, I'd been doing my coaching training. So I did the level 7 with the ILM, qualified, decided that things weren't working for me in terms of my job. I do write about it in my book, but in the chapter. But I decided I needed to get out for my own mental health. So I left with no job to go to, figured myself out, worked on myself. People will notice I dug a pond, which was the bit that kind of cleared my head. I decided that I needed to get in the garden, do something physical, fill 2 skips with mud, all of that just to do something that wasn't brain heavy. That's what I needed to do, actually, to clear myself, because I spent too much time in my own head and needed to not do that. So I did that, and then I thought, well, let's see what I can do. So I decided to go self-employed just before the pandemic, which I guess you don't work these things out in that kind of way. But so I started, I then got to, when did I get to? April 2020. I lost all of my work in 48 hours. Everything that had happened, all was cancelled. Every email, every phone call was, I'm really sorry, Matt, we can't have you in the building. Zoom hadn't really that virtual working space hadn't really taken off, and people were quite nervous of it. So I lost everything. Didn't get any government support because I was a new business. But then I got to about June, and this is where you were really helpful. We've talked about this when we did our podcast, is that my Twitter took off around that time, kind of April 20. It really took off. And it became really fortuitous. It then became head teachers started contacting me to say, we're after a coach because we don't know what we're doing. We're spending a lot of our time worrying about PPE and risk assessments and keeping people safe, and we don't actually know how to do it. So we just want someone not to tell us how to do it, but just to take some of the load off. And so that's what I did. So it was lots of ranting coaching, I think. So I normally coach for a couple of hours. The first 30 minutes were pretty ranty, not from my perspective, not me, of course, but just people given the chance to offload and just clear their heads. There was zero strategy. We weren't talking about strategy. We weren't talking about school development plans. We weren't talking about leadership. It was just the chance of people to offload, and in a really safe, confidential space. That's where the magic was. And then it just took off. So now I do it full time. I'm really lucky. I'm a full-time coach. My business, touch wood, is all right. I'm really lucky that I get to do what I do, and I work with some extraordinary leaders. It's such a privileged space to be in. I'm so glad that you started your training. Fingers crossed for your assignment. I'm sure you'll do fine. But it's a magical space. You know, there's nothing like it. The opportunity to have a one-to-one with somebody that's confidential, supportive, but equally really challenging is just magnificent. You know, I've figured out my limit. I can do 5 hours in a day, and then my brain just 4 o'clock, that's it departs. I have to get on the beach with the dog and clear my head. But it's really, there's nothing like it. And every session is different. Every person is different. I never quite know who's going to turn up in terms of how they're presenting. And my job is just to hold them, walk alongside them, be their ally, but also to ask them really difficult questions. Like Verity, I would say I used to describe myself as really nosy. Like I was one of those people that if I was walking the dog, like if someone's curtains were a bit open, I'd be like, oh, I want to have a look in their lounge. Or I spend my hours on Rightmove looking at people's furniture and all that. I've now changed it to be curious because it sounds much more professional. So I would now say that I'm a curious human being. But I really want people to be the best they can be. And that's my driver, is I've been so well supported through people on this call who join. I run a thing called Edgy Drinks with Teacher Paul. We do a monthly online drinking session. You get a different mat in those ones, I would say. But we have developed networks that support each other. And that's the magic of coaching. It's just a connection with another human being who cares about you and wants you to be the very best version of yourself. And that's what my chapter is about. I've just talked, but the chapter is about that. It's asking yourself the big questions, like who are you? What are you about? What makes you tick? What are your values? What are your behaviors? And how do you find congruence in your value set and your behaviors and the life that you lead? Because if we get to that place, it's lovely.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons that I really wanted your chapter in there is that you and I have had many, many discussions about that who am I and the value set, and the podcast that I did with you was very much about those values and the fact that actually if your values don't align with the school that you're working in, there will be a disconnect. There will be, you will feel uncomfortable. And actually the important thing is that we need to recognize what our values are. We need to know who we are. We need to work out what's important to us in order to work out, where we need to be. And I think, so that's why I loved your chapter, Matt. And fingers crossed, I passed my coaching and, and I love what you're doing. And there are lots of comments going, oh, I need to join that drinking session. Yes, you do get a rather different version of Matt, everyone. Slightly less, less coachy. They're great.
I would say it becomes very coachy about 1 o'clock in the morning. That's what I say.
I've never been there at 1 o'clock in the morning. I always leave earlier.
Yeah, I did wonder if there was something about drunken coaching. I don't think it's a thing. I think I'd get struck off. I don't know, but
possibly.
But I think what I say is you get a different Matt. You get one who's had a couple of glasses of wine or two, but. What I would say is actually, the bit about values is about our essence. My essence never changes. So who I am, what I'm about, what I stand for, my passion for people, that never changes. It's just the slurring changes. That's the bit that's different. But in terms of what I'm about, I've worked really hard to figure out who I am. And that's why I can be an authentic coach, is because I encourage other people to feel vulnerable but safe enough to talk about who they are and what they want to be, but without alcohol, which is helpful.
No, and I think you know, that's absolutely spot on. And for, you know, as you said, for anyone community wise, for anyone that hasn't joined those edu drinks, they are great because you do get to meet and connect with different members of the community across the country. I mean, it is rather fantastic because I have, you know, virtually met so many people here through edu drinks. Yeah. Thank you so much, Matt. And I'm really excited because Lizana, who I wasn't sure if she'd be able to make it, but she is here. Now, Lizana also contributed to the Past about Professional and Personal Development, and she wrote about the joy of mentoring. So Lizana, where are you?
I'm over here.
I'm looking across my screen. I really shouldn't have it on the. I've got 3 million people here. I can see.
Imagine.
So for anyone that hasn't come across you, Lizana, who is Lizana Oberholzer, I should say?
Lovely. Thank you for the introduction, Toria. And it was great to see you last night as well. Toria also launched the book at the IPTA conference yesterday, and it was nice to talk about your nails.
Oh, yeah. Anyone that hasn't seen them, like, they're
really,
really good, my nails. They're done as the book. So, yeah.
Amazing.
So, anyway, over to you, Lizana.
Thank you. My name is Lizana Oberholzer. I have been a teacher for a very long time before I made the leap into higher education, and I'm currently a senior lecturer at the University of Wolverhampton. And my main job there is to look after the National Professional Qualifications for School Leadership, as well as the Early Careers Framework. And I'm also teaching on the postgraduate provision. So I work on the MAs, and I also have colleagues who I support as a mentor and supervisor on the doctoral courses that we run there. But initially, like everyone else, I was a school teacher who had to be mentored to become a school teacher and work closely with that mentor to succeed. And the chapter I wrote about those unsung heroes and those quiet voices of mentors who actually on a day-to-day basis work very closely with our new teachers, our new professionals who need to find their feet and really develop in the classroom as volunteers. And those mentors are often unrecognized for their work, but actually they do a tremendous job to really impact on our profession in the way that they do, because once they've worked with someone, they are ready to move into the teaching profession and the classroom as a qualified teacher. So for me, it's always been a great privilege to be a mentor. I've moved into mentorship very early on in my own career. I've always had a mentee, and what I found was that I learned so much more from them than they actually probably learned from me. But like Matt, I've also done a lot of coaching work. I still do that, and we've also done a podcast on then coaching and mentoring a while ago, which was very much the beginning of this journey with yourselves and Tiny Voice Talk, which was very invigorating. And it's such an honor and privilege to work with you and also to listen to colleagues today in terms of their work and their contributions. And I think what really inspired me was great mentors. And throughout my career, I've always tried to give back. And I've worked with mentors in a similar way because they also wanted to make a difference. And it's lovely to see Sharifa today as well, because we also wrote a blog together at some point called Balmas about mentoring and coaching, and I haven't seen her since. So it's been really, really nice to catch up with colleagues as well that I haven't seen in a while. So that's very much what my chapter is about, is that role of the mentor, how they contribute, how they work with others, how they aim to meet other people's needs. A really selfless job, but a very important one, which we shouldn't underestimate and celebrate more often in teaching.
Thank you so much, Lizana. And I should also mention that Lizana got an award last night, everyone. Lizana, tell everyone about your award.
I like keeping these things under the cover. Really.
Yeah, no, that doesn't happen when you're around me. It's like Lizana got an award, everyone.
Yes, I've been awarded an IPTA Fellowship for my contribution to the association and the work I've done with IPTA. Thank you. It's a huge privilege and honour. I'm as proud of that as I am, and I can see Alison's in the room as well. I've listened to her this afternoon. it's the equivalent to being a fellow of the Chartered College of Teaching, which I'm really proud of myself. So thank you for mentioning it.
You're so welcome, you really are. Now, I'm now going to hand over to Andrew Cowley. Now, Andrew, many of you will know, is an author of wellbeing books. He is a passionate advocate about ensuring that we have wellbeing at the heart of our schools, and he gave us a pre-publication review. So, Andrew, over to you.
Thank you, Toria, and I hope you are having a wonderful afternoon, listening to all this fantastic comments about you. Yeah, I was delighted to receive a copy in real life. Had it on PDF first of all, and it's fantastic. It really is the most amazing book. Toria, you've got to get it on Goodreads though, because I've got a challenge. 40 books to read for you. I read it, and it's not on Goodreads, so I need to be on there so I can tick something else off. So let's all. It's now on Goodreads. Fantastic, Gemma. Thank you. So I can. That's another one for my target. I can tick off. I've met Toria a number of times on podcasts and on Teach Hub Radio as well. And anyone who knows Toria will really know the significance of butterflies. You've got your wonderful butterfly dress on. I see you've got your on your publicity photo. You had your wonderful butterfly display, which is, I'm assuming, is somewhere else in your house. But what Toria does is reference the butterfly effect in the opening sentence in what I can only describe as an inspired collection of essays from the right range of Tiny Voices. And of course, hashtag Tiny Voice Talks began life as a Twitter hashtag. But the voices aren't tiny in their Twitter following, but in their volume, as we've been hearing from before. But Toria's innovative hashtags really amplified and emboldened those voices through the Tuesday morning engagements and by means of the Tiny Voice Talks podcast, which if you haven't listened to, I suspect many of you have. They are just fantastic podcasts to listen to. Whole range of people, and over 100 editions now. Sorry, I'm sure you. I'm sure there must be a podcast award we can nominate you for as well. But it's great to have those podcasts. But this book reaches beyond the world of Twitter, and it passes the pen to those experienced, authentic, and passionate practitioners, some of whom we've heard from today. Toria talked in her introduction about being that teacher. We've all had that teacher. I can remember that teacher several times from my education, not every single year, but at crucial points, and they made a big difference to our lives. That teacher's got a multiple of guises, quirks, and styles, but their commonality is their belief that they can put children and their colleagues first. What I really love about this book, and if I was in a school, I would say to my colleagues, it's a whole year's worth of staff meeting reading. Pieces short but detailed enough to generate debate around such things as the role of the SENCO, the why in EYFS, mentoring, challenging issues around diversity, and how we can all grow as leaders. The stories in here to cause the reader to reflect, to laugh, to cry, and to realising that what they've been saying for years has been right all along. Now, the most important aspect of the Tiny Voice Talks movement is the emphasis on community. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about community in recent times. Outside of what I do on Twitter, I'm very active in my local community, and we've been trying to make it work a lot more. And I want to paraphrase the words of John F. Kennedy at his inauguration here. Ask not what my community can do for me, but what can I do for my community? And I'm sure everyone here wants to thank you, Toria, for what you've done for the educational community on social media and beyond. But of course, social media doesn't run our schools. Contrary to what perhaps some of those macho voices that we've referred to today already might think. But the community of tiny voices might just enable your school to function differently. Toria Husband, who's also here today, eloquently says in the final contribution to this book, The loudest voice is sometimes just the biggest ego. I absolutely love that line. The Tiny Voices movement is about enabling those who perhaps aren't the most confident to spend hours on social media debate to have their contribution heard. For this reason, Toria's collection needs to be in every staff room library. If the beat of one single butterfly's wings might be felt on the other side of the globe, just imagine the impact and the power of the wings of the tiny voices beating in unison. Toria, it's your day. It's the day for all the tiny voices here. Have a fantastic day. I hope you've got a glass or two of something afterwards to celebrate with. It's been an absolute pleasure knowing you, working with you virtually. Hopefully we will meet one day in real life. Thank you so much for this. It's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you so much, Andrew. You know, your support is it's just wonderful. And what I love is that you see and get what we're about, what the tiny voices are about, and it's that flapping of wings and it's that changing of cultures. And I think, yeah, thank you so much. Anyway, we're back, Tiny Voice Talks, and the next bit that we are talking about is their stories. So we had to have a bit in here, which is people talking about their stories. And Sharifa has alluded to the first person who's coming on to talk about their story. And what I need to say about Caitlin before you hear her is Caitlin was one of the very first people that came on the podcast. And this was quite impactful because Caitlin had actually, it was the very first time Caitlin had had her voice heard. And that felt like a tremendous privilege for me to be allowed to hold that space for her. She then went on, and honestly, there's just no stopping her. Really, it's just she just seems to keep rolling, and Sharifa's nodding because she does. She seems to keep rolling, and that's what I absolutely love about Caitlin. That actually she's found her voice and she's using it, and she is impacting. So, Caitlin, come on down.
I'm here.
Well done, you, Caitlin. Did you like your introduction there?
I did. I'm feeling the pressure.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on you. There really is. Okay, so yeah, no pressure, honestly, Caitlin. You know me. So, for anyone that hasn't come across you, Caitlin, who is Caitlin Bracken?
This question is not any easier this time than when you ask it on the podcast.
It's not meant to be.
Right. So, I'm a Year 1 teacher. I'm also a Key Stage 2 French teacher. I work in Sharifa's school, and it's very nice to have her here as like a little cheerleader. That support is very much appreciated. I don't know what to do. See, the pressure's
Okay, so that's fine. I will then ask you, Caitlin, because I know for you, finding your voice and using it is something that has been challenging. So you wrote a chapter called Kintsugi. Now, Kintsugi is the most beautiful, beautiful Japanese pottery, absolutely gorgeous. And you talked about it in relation to you. So talk to me about your chapter.
So my chapter is about my journey to becoming a teacher. It's got a couple of references to people who were that teacher for me. I was very lucky that I had a lot of very good teachers, but there were a few who stood out. And I guess in my chapter, I'm just very focused on that idea of it doesn't have to matter what came before. You can put yourself back together again, or have somebody else put you back together again. And I don't know, seeing it in print made it more powerful. I'd written something that your damage makes you stronger and more beautiful for it. So the main teacher that I wrote about was my French teacher, who was an incredible lady. She absolutely embodied sort of that teacher. For people who've read my chapter, you'll know that she sort of gave us funny nicknames. She called us Petit Chou-Fleur, which is kind of a play on a French term of endearment. It literally translates to little cauliflowers. This was when we were 16, mind. You know, we weren't patronized by it. It was just her. It's just what she did. And she unfortunately passed away when I was in sixth form. And that was kind of a big catalyst for me. I kind of stopped talking for a little while because I have an anxiety disorder, and I didn't know at that point, but I knew that I wasn't talking hardly at all. So the fact that I'm a teacher now and I talk all day it's a big deal. But I only got there because of the support and the belief of other people and the people that supported me. I'm just looking at this. I've been looking at the gallery view, and this was a mistake. I can see lots of people.
Well, I just want to say, so I'm just going to sort of interrupt to say, you should see them. I'll read you some of the messages. So it says, Bookie said, your chapter was powerful, Caitlin. Sarah, Caitlin, your words resonate so much. Nazia, your words are so powerful. Liv, it's a lovely philosophy. So actually, the people that read it, everyone in front of you, all the faces that you can see, not only heard your voice, but it absolutely resonated with them, because not one of us sitting here actually is the same piece of pottery we were when we came out. We are all Kintsugi, and what I love is the fact that actually you, in a sense, you shine a light on it and you talk about the beauty there.
Thank you. It's really nice to hear, you know, what people have said, and to hear that other people are not hearing what I'm hearing, because all I can hear is just kind of this sort of disjointed. I don't know, the words aren't coming out, but I guess if my message is getting across, then that's good.
In all honesty, your message is truly getting across. There's nothing disjointed about it. But that's why I do what I do, why we are all here today, because it's voices like yours that are so absolutely vital to hear and raise up. And actually, it's voices like yours that if we swallow them, you know, what we want to do is have voices coming out, so we're supporting our children so that actually their voices are heard. Honestly, what you need to do is you need to read the chat, because seriously, it'll make you cry. You do need like a box of tissues beside you when you read it, Caitlin. But like, go and read the chat. Probably turn your camera off at that point, because you
yeah,
will
probably will. I probably will.
And oh, Caitlin, I'm so grateful that you had your voice heard in the chapter. I really am. And you know, what no one here knows is that we are also doing. We've started doing a podcast together, which actually we don't host. We go on as guests, all about it's storytelling. It's fascinating, isn't it, Caitlin?
So
yes,
sharing all that stuff that we do every day, but that kind of brainstorming with people is brilliant.
It's so much fun. It's the most bizarre podcast, but it's so much fun to do. And I'm now going to go over to Oliver Wright. So Oliver, where are you?
I'm here. Hi, Toria.
Oh, you're there. I can see you. Hi, Oliver. So
Hi.
for anyone that doesn't know who Oliver Wright is, who is Oliver Wright?
I'm just like Caitlin, that I hate this question. And I remember even at teaching interviews almost being the one that it was supposed to be the question that settles you down. And it was the most difficult one for me. But I'm Oliver. I've been a teacher for a very long time. So I think I've worked out 25 years in education in total. I've also been a head teacher, and I now am out of school and I work for a company called Twinkle. And I lead the senior leadership part of that business. So I have a really sort of free role that I can almost do whatever I want as long as it makes a difference for people. So it's brilliant.
Now, your chapter, Oliver, I need to find, sorry, I put the book down, Oliver, don't tell me.
Okay, I've got mine here. So that,
okay.
Yes.
Oh, good. Right, Oliver, here we go.
Yeah.
It's like fluid here. It's called The Wisdom of Talking Heads. So tell me where the inspiration for that came from.
This was a really interesting one, actually, because I also do a radio program for Teacher Hug Radio, and I get to, it's a real privilege to just literally have an hour talking to a head teacher about their journey, where they've come from, what they've learned from that, what they've learned along the way, how they've sort of progressed their career, and who they are. And I was noticing in doing these interviews that there were sort of common threads coming through from them, and probably nearly all the heads that I spoke to almost sort of felt like they shouldn't be there. And there was that level of sort of imposter syndrome of, you know, I'm not worthy. And these people who everyone else in their school was looking up to for leadership were still feeling as if they weren't really worthy to be there. And a lot of the things that they'd done to develop themselves personally and to progress their career were things that would benefit all of us to do. And there was almost a sort of sense that lots of us in education feel as if we're not worthy. Lots of us feel as if we're, you know, other people have got those big macho voices, or other people have got the opinions that count. And yet there were lots of genuinely lovely people who were just doing the right things and developing their careers, whether that was as teachers or whether that was as leaders or even as senior leaders. And it was just trying to pull together some of those threads that I'd spotted. And I hope it's been useful for people.
It's incredibly useful. It really is. As you said, you know, actually just that pulling together of threads sometimes is so incredibly helpful. So yeah, I mean, it's the feedback has been fantastic with regards to, you know, how it's impacted. So thank you so much, Oliver.
That's okay. Thank you very much, Toria.
Now, I'm on to the next bit, which is about how you find your voice. Now, finding your voice is tricky, but I've got 4 people that are going to talk about what they wrote about. And we're going to start off with Amy. So where is Amy Pickard? Where are you? I can see you're fiddling with your computer. So go for it, Amy. Who is Amy Pickard?
Hello, it's nice to see faces at last.
It's lovely to actually see you and hear you. I've never actually met you, Amy. It's lovely. Loving this.
On the screen, but you know, here's face to face. Well, I'm a teacher of over 20 years, and I've been fortunate enough to work in primary education across all the age groups and lead a wide variety of subjects. Currently, I'm in my happy place of teaching Year 4 and leading English. And I like to think of myself as a classic teacher, as my school colleagues helped me to realise that I wasn't old Amy anymore. When a new one came to our school, they called me classic Amy. So I'll go with that. I'm sorry, Toria, I can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
I am. Every so often I try to get really professional and mute myself. It doesn't really work. I need to just carry on being unprofessional. That's the way forward, I think. Right, here we go. So, Amy, you wrote about big wins for tiny voices. So what inspired that?
Well, basically, the key thing is I didn't want people being my age or having to teach for over 20 years before they found their voice. I think that's far too long. I'm also really keen to share what I've learned and top tips that have helped me over the years. I'm constantly learning, but some of the things are quick wins that I've found have really helped me, and I hope they can help others. I really would like more teachers to come into the profession, but more than that, I would like them to be able to stay in the profession for longer. I've worked with lots of teachers coming in, and sometimes that burnout is a real problem. And I think if they can just learn to use their big voice, it can just be so powerful. I'm someone who regularly rehearses conversations, all the different ways they can go before they actually happen. And I really appreciate how overthinking can inhibit us from speaking out. But I just hope that the tips that I've managed to put into the chapter in the book can help someone else, whether they need to ask for help or they feel like they've got a difficult conversation ahead they need to have, or whether they're just exploring positive ways that they can use their voice. It's taken me quite some time to realise that, it's not just within my school where my voice can be heard, it's that bigger impact as well outside of my immediate school. I like to be a quiet observer for quite some time, but I do feel I would like lots of people to get their voice used much earlier on than after 20 years. I think that's far too long.
I completely agree, Amy, and I think you're right. I think finding our voice within our schools is sometimes really, really tricky. If we are voicing something and then someone higher up the proverbial ladder is actually dismissing it, then, you know, that can cause us to lose our voice. I think you're absolutely right. It's about finding those little wins and being able to feel empowered, because actually, if we go right back to the beginning, it's about the flapping the wings. It's about, you know, making change by actually being able to voice stuff. And that, you know, I love your chapter because it gives lots of practical tips on how to do that. And the other thing that you just said was, wouldn't it be great if more people stayed in our profession? Because actually we seem to be losing people hand over fist at the moment who are surviving for a very short period and then going. But you, like me, we've been around for 20 years. I love our profession. I love teaching. But actually, we need to get more people to fully get that. And I think they get that when they find their voice. So you're right. We need to help them.
There's a great freedom and confidence that comes once you've found that voice. And I've found that working with colleagues and helping share these ideas has really helped some of them. So I hope it can help some others through the book as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Amy. Now I'm on to Fabian Darkey. You're looking very smart today in the suit, Fabian. Like the fact you dressed up for the book launch. Much appreciated. How are you? And for anyone that doesn't know, who is Fabian Darkey?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And I'd just like to firstly say that my copy of Tiny Voices Talk arrived in the post this morning. So I was really happy to get that. And I think what made me laugh the most was my son actually likes the bookmark that came along with the order. So he's really infatuated with the bookmark already.
It's a fab bookmark. I just love the bookmark. It's like amazing.
Yeah, so I think my kids are going to be fighting over that. But yeah, so just so glad to be a part of the project. And it was nice for me to hear my wife read the chapter to my kids this morning when it arrived in the post. It was such a nice thing to see and to hear, and it just shows how powerful the book is. So it's something that I've read over the past few weeks. I've had a look through some of the chapters. I haven't quite finished everything yet, but there's some really inspirational stories in there, and my story in particular just focuses on my route into teaching. So I haven't always been a teacher. My working career, I was in retail to start with, and similar to what Matt Deshane was saying, I went through the GTP program, which was a graduate teacher program, and it just made me realize that I wanted to do something where I was making a difference to the lives of young people. So I just knew that teaching was a career that would be good for me. But just like a lot of people in the profession, we sometimes hit a bit of a wall. And my chapter is mostly about discussing how I've used things like blogging with different sites to help things like my own well-being and mental health. And it's just led me into a different path of my career, really. So I'm now a teacher trainer as well as a lecturer in sport in a further education setting in Watford called West Herts College. And I've just really had a really kind of like a busy few years where I feel really reinvigorated in terms of what I've come across through the reading of different blogs, of different websites. I'm involved in different teaching magazines like Rise Magazine, and just so many different sites that I've learned from myself, but I've just gradually liked to become a part of. So it's just been a really busy time in teaching for everyone over the past few years. And something that was really passionate to me and still is reflective practice in teaching. So I came up with a model a few years ago, and I called it RATE. So the R just stands for reflect. So anytime I've taught a lesson, I'll just look at what went well and what maybe didn't. I'll really just take a look at myself and how the lesson went, how the learning was for my students in the classroom. And then I'll look at any achievements that happen. So it's always important to acknowledge the achievements of our learners in the class, just to show them that we appreciate the efforts that are being made. And then with the T, I try to focus on target setting. So if there's anything that hasn't worked in the lesson, I'll set myself a target to focus on in future lessons and try and enforce it as quickly as possible. So that takes me on to the E part of the rates model. So it's based on evaluating and enforcing any improvements you'd like to make to your lesson. So I use it as a personal reflection tool within my teaching. It's just something that seems to have helped other teachers that I've come across as well that have read the model. And it's just been really nice to come online today and just hear a lot of the stories. Yeah, really impressed with what Caitlin was saying a few minutes ago as well, and just shows a lot of courage to come on something like this when you know it's out of your comfort zone. And again, it's something that I've mentioned in my chapter as well. So I came up with 4 C's. So they were two of them were mentioned by Dame Alison Peacock a bit earlier, which was nice to hear. So creativity, which I feel all teachers need in the profession to just not be afraid to branch out into new methods of teaching. Courage, which is something that a lot of the contributors have shown, to show courage to change a career path and to do something like this. Communication, and that's something that I've learned from being involved with a lot of the chats on Twitter, such as Tiny Voice Talks, communicating with each other to better ourselves in the profession. And then confidence as well. So I find that the more we communicate with each other, the more our confidence improves, because we share good practice, and it in turn is good for our students and good for our schools or colleges or places of work. And obviously with the pandemic happening over the past few years, it is something that we've all needed in terms of improving our mental health and well-being. And I feel like the project Tiny Voices Talk is such a great project to be involved in, and it's something that is on Twitter every Tuesday. So a lot of people come together to share ideas, and I've just been really glad to be part of the project. And one thing, Toria, you've mentioned to me earlier when we had a podcast chat, was you described me as a perpetual learner, which I was great to. Yep. That was great to hear. And I'm one of those people that's always on teachers' radio stations, and I know Teacher Hug Radio has been mentioned, and some of the presenters are online today. I've just seen Oliver and Matt Deshane. So it's just been great to be part of things like that, and it's really helped me in my passion for teaching. And I've been in the profession since 2008, and it's just been a busy time, but just a fantastic period in my life, and hopefully others will look forward to reading the book.
Thank you so much, Fabian. And yeah, that's how I came across you, with all of your sort of, because you continually seem to be listening to stuff. It was great. But you are a perpetual learner, and you know, your chapter is fantastic about your, you know, the various reflections and so on. So great chapter, everyone, called When Tiny Voices Speak, You Listen. Now, moving on to Dave Tushingham. So, Dave, where are you? I can't see Dave. Where are you? Oh, you're there. Hello. Goodness. You see, I still have it on the gallery view, so everyone's just sort of blurred in. So, for anyone that doesn't know you, Dave, who is Dave Tushingham?
Well, firstly, Dave Tushingham is a massive admirer of everybody that's written for this book, everybody here. The voices are just incredible, and what a privilege to be amongst such company. It's been absolutely wonderful to listen to this. So it's a big congratulations to it, and just thank you to everyone. But so I'm Dave Tushingham. I'm a maths teacher in a secondary school in Bristol. I've been teaching for about 20 years now, and just have a passion for learning, and effectively stayed in school because I just love learning, and found my passion for helping others through that. But yeah, just really enjoy sort of finding out more about myself and about teaching, about pedagogy.
And you have written a chapter called The First Rule of Book Club. So tell us about Book Club. And then, Dave, you can tell us about the exciting thing that we're doing in January that we are telling the various contributors about. So go for it, Dave.
Oh, thank you very much. So yeah, basically, we got to the first lockdown, and our academy had set up some really nice resources for the students, and immediately into some asynchronous home learning, so that the students wouldn't lose out during this time more than they would do anyway from not being able to be in school. And myself and a colleague, Rihanna Rainbow, sort of got together and just thought, we need something for the staff too, because the staff don't get to practice their teaching, their craft whilst we're in lockdown. And so we thought sort of really carefully about what we could do, and we started reading books. And we just didn't know where to go with these books. They were great books, but we didn't really sort of know necessarily what it would look like in our classroom. We felt this sort of imposter syndrome. We felt that we didn't have enough knowledge to succeed in sort of translating what these authors were saying. And so we started to take small extracts and discuss it together. And the more we learned, the more that we realized we didn't know. And just it's just sort of snowballed. And our big sort of core value throughout all of that was to give everybody a voice, a little bit like the Tiny Voices. It was the idea that every single person here and every single person in our book club would have that unique experience where they would bring something to the table that the rest of us wouldn't have thought of, and that would help us to reflect, and that would help us all to become better practitioners. So we get together, we'd listen to each other's thoughts, and we'd all get this sort of one takeaway that we'd be able to then try in our classroom practice, and we'd have a better understanding of what those books were all about. And again, a bit like the book as well, we'd have our golden thread going through, sort of connecting different chapters, different books together, so we could see those repetitive messages, and we could start to really understand sort of what these bigger names were telling us. But we could listen to people that were in the classroom, their interpretations, and get something that really helped us to understand. Really, really lucky. The generosity of some of these authors has just been phenomenal, and to be able to sort of have them join us to talk about sort of why they've written what they've written and what they think it means, and then to be able to translate it ourselves, and for us to share with them what it looks like in our classrooms, and for them to tell us that they're learning from us as well, just really sort of perpetuated that message that every single voice counts and matters, and everybody's got something to offer. And it's been a sort of a real learning curve, but a really exciting journey too.
Absolutely. And you said about the authors joining you, and Dave, what is happening in January?
So we got a very important special author joining us in January, who's going to come and talk to us, and really looking forward to coming on to your podcast too. But Tori, you're going to come and talk to us on our book club and be able to sort of share some of the thoughts from some other people too. So really, really excited about that particular session.
Absolutely. And if any of the contributors want to join us, I mean, I'm not quite sure how long this podcast lasts, how long the book club lasts for. You know, if we're all joining, we're all talking about our chapters, it might need to be a day's worth. But you know if you do want to join, get in touch with Dave so he can actually develop it, because I know, Dave, you were very, very keen on actually unpicking some of the chapters as well, weren't you?
Absolutely. It's as I said before, it's all about hearing every single voice and every single chapter contributing to the development of the people listening to the podcast or the book club session, our recordings that we share for free for everybody to listen to. And so yeah, if anybody is interested in coming and joining us, please do, because we'd love to sort of talk with you and learn from you, and just to be able to look at what this particular book too means for our classrooms every day. Because I've listened to this book launch all the way through, taking something from every single person that's talked today, thinking that's what it looks like in my class, and that's what I could do differently. Yeah. I do that already, but I don't do it in that way. Or I haven't thought about those particular aspects whilst I'm teaching. And so if anyone wants to come and share any of their ideas and what they've written, we essentially, it's like a coffee shop chat for an hour. We don't have a really big structure. We just talk Tori will introduce your idea behind why you wrote this book, and then it would just be a matter of us saying, well, this is what it means for us in our classrooms, and anybody can talk for as much or as little as they want. You can just listen, or you can come and talk a little bit more about what you've written about, and then at the end somebody will share what they're going to take away and try in their classroom. So if that's of interest, absolutely, it'd be lovely to have people with us.
Sounds fantastic, Dave. Thank you. And I think you're right. You know, it's about the tiny voices, and it's about us impacting on, you know, the children in our care by our teaching and what we are doing. Now, this book is special for a number of reasons, people. But I think this is the most special reason. Are you ready? There's not just one Toria in this book. There are two. You've got Toria Bonnet and you've got Toria Husband. It's like there are two Torias in this book. It's phenomenal. There are many books where you have two Torias. So, Toria Husband. Who is Toria Husband?
I realised I've got my full name on my Zoom today as well. So my proper name is Victoria, but I always get called Toria. So yeah, absolutely lovely. Apologies in advance. My dog has been quiet all afternoon, asleep on the chair. She's just decided now to wake up. So I'm keep feeding her roast beef as we speak. So hopefully that will keep her quiet for a bit.
Fantastic. So Toria, it's really bizarre calling someone else Toria. Right.
I've been listening to it. Everyone's calling you Toria all afternoon. I'm going, oh, yeah, what?
So who is Toria Husband?
I don't know. It's a bit like Oliver said, actually. It's that question that's meant to ease you in gently, but the one I always waffle on. So if I go off track, then please feel free to stop me. So after many years of fighting against not wanting to be a teacher, eventually I decided that was the route for me. Fell in love with it. I was a performer. I used to work with a theatre company doing lots of theatre and education shows and doing workshops. And I suppose it was from the workshops that got me into teaching. I kind of wanted to follow that through. So my background is drama, mainstream secondary, and then moved off into leading teaching and learning in a pupil referral unit, and also a foster carer on occasion, sort of when needed. Yeah, that's who I am.
Love that. Now, you wrote about you being you, and what I love about this book is that every single voice in this book is authentically them. Everyone is them, and that's why, you know, I chose to put your chapter last, because it is about you being you, me being me, us being us. What inspired you to write that chapter?
To be absolutely honest, I had no idea what I wanted to say to start with. I said I was going to write something, and it had got to sort of 2 days before the submission, and I took my favourite notebook in the garden and sat in the garden and just kind of thought, I don't know what I've actually got to say that would be worthy of going in a book. As I've mentioned in my chapter, I kind of had to reinvent myself and kind of take stock on where I was in life and what I wanted to do moving forward. And I think I sort of used that as an opportunity, really, to kind of think about what I'd learned along the way, my plan, if you can call it that. I talk in my chapter about, you know, that being in shreds and ripping it up and starting again. Yeah, so I suppose, and I think it was at the time when, you know, Twitter was full of ECTs not having their first job, and I think kind of feeling that when you're in that situation, it feels as though everybody else around you has got their lives sorted and, you know, has the plan, and it's easy to feel that you haven't. So I think that sort of prompted it a little bit as well. And I suppose I just started to reflect on kind of who I was, a little bit like what Matt was talking about as well, like what do I believe in, who am I, what is important to me. And yeah, I suppose I just started, like, I think almost a letter to my younger self, I suppose, really, in some respects.
Yeah, and wouldn't it be so great if we all wrote that letter to ourselves?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it certainly allowed me, it was almost therapy in a way, sitting in a sunny afternoon in the garden. It just made me think about how, at a time in my life when I wasn't really sure what I was going to do next, so I sort of had a bit of a plan about me. So I moved into pupil referral unit in Sheffield, but not really knowing, and it certainly was never part of the plan, but just allowed me that time to sort of take stock and think about what have I learned from people along the way, who have I learned from, who are the best leaders that I've learned from, and what do I want to take from that. But as I referenced in my book, all in my chapter, what have I learned that I definitely don't, that isn't me, that I don't believe in, that I can't be that person. So yeah, kind of where we went with it. And I think what was important as well is that actually over the summer, I talk in my chapter about not having the plan and the plan shredding and ripping it up and starting again. And just after I'd written that chapter, so this summer again, life happened, and I had to adapt again. So even as I was writing the chapter, I thought I was sorted. I thought I knew what I was doing. I did for quite a while. And then I've needed to be more flexible. I've needed to keep moving between Sheffield and down to Hampshire. So again, it's just about not being scared to start again. I mentioned in the chapter as well, something that I think I would probably say is probably one of the most important things for me actually. I spent so long kind of thinking, what does my CV look like? If somebody's reading my CV, my past, I suppose, sort of 5-6 years, reads as being quite random, to be honest. And I think I'm now quite comfortable with that and not being scared that that doesn't look like the trajectory that you would expect somebody to be on, and kind of embracing that, I suppose.
Yeah, because you are you.
Yeah.
Now, before we move on to Ian, I just want, because we've got contributors on here that haven't spoken, but I just wanted to mention all the various chapters that I haven't covered yet. So we've got, again, in the professional personal development, Kate Jane talks about coaching within their own stories. Bronte talks about the long way round to teaching. Lucy Griffith talks about outside noise. Emma Platt talks about mostly stark and invisible illness. Nazia Dar talks about coming into education later in life. Rebecca Waker talks about less why, more how. And Gemma talks about why dyslexic people make great teachers. And then finally, we've got Brendan O'Sullivan in the Tiny Voice talks about ways to find your voice, which is finding your voice through subject association. Do you know what today has? I just feel filled up. I feel like, wow, this is amazing. Now, Ian has lived and breathed this process with me. He's also lived and breathed many stressed moments in my life in the last year and a half, haven't you, Ian? So I'm going to hand over to you, Ian. Yeah, just a bit. I'm going to hand over to you, Ian, to talk. Off you go.
Oh, thank you very much. I don't get the who's Ian Gilbert question. Very good.
Oh, sorry. No, who's Ian? So I will do that now. Okay, right. Okay, here we go. Who's Ian Gilbert?
Oh, there we go. You see. Yeah, I'm a writer and an author, a speaker, an entrepreneur, innovator, all those sorts of things. That's sort of one way of doing it. The speaking bit is interesting. So I'm nervous, even though I'm a professional speaker. The first time and the last time I met Dame Alison Peacock was we were speaking in Spain in some huge auditorium, and the King of Spain was in the audience for us both. So I just came off stage, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Oh, the King wants to speak to you." So, which is pretty cool. But you still get nervous. So those of you who have spoken here today, fantastic, because you get nervous. And that's what I once heard somebody say from acting, nerves are the respect you pay your audience. So I've been speaking for 30 years. Most of you are 20 years. You're making me feel old. I've got 10 years ahead of most of you in education. I've been speaking for 30 years and I still get nervous every time I'm doing it. This is the first time I've sat one of these Zooms and not spoken for 3 hours. That's a first for me as well. So But then as the sword of Damocles comes towards me, you get, you know, the heart sort of going, and so I know how you feel. So even the professional speaker who's out there on the stages, nerves are fine. So you've done really well. So I'm in awe of you having spoken. So well done for that. I'm also an imposter at this party, because it's like inviting the midwife to the first birthday party. All I did was sort of help it out. I was going to say help it out of Toria there, but you know what I mean, help it out generally. That's the role that I play. I'm sort of there supporting, encouraging the author when to push, when to breathe. And I know we always get to that point with every author that I've worked with. In the last few weeks of it, sort of just get this thing out of me. It's just, I thought it would be done now. I had one book, I won't say who the author was, but he sent off his first draft and then was like on Twitter going, yeah, I got my book away. And I think his book was about another year and a half before it eventually came out. It's quite a process. But that's because we want to do it right. We want the best book for you. The publisher Crown House. So Independent Thinking, which is my company, Independent Thinking Press, is an imprint of Crown House. So Crown House do all that sort of that side, you know, the publishing side of it, and my job is just the editor midwife role. And Independent Thinking is a company I set up 30 years ago I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. I said I wanted to get the most out of young people. And over those 30 years, nearly 30 years, it's sort of grown in this organic way to be a platform for some fantastic speakers that you might have come across, people like, I know, Howell Roberts and Dr. Deborah Kidd and Jim Roberson and Dave Harris. There's some fantastic people. Then my role in many ways is like herding cats. I've often thought of it as like herding cats. This thing here, is herding kittens, because you like cats, but you're a little bit more excitable and a bit cuter. So this is the herding kitten side of things. And I'd also just like to say as well, Toria's doing just such a fantastic job. She makes this hosting thing look so easy. She's channeling Claudia Winkleman really, really well. If ever there was a program of Strictly Come Teaching, she'd be leading it. She's spot on with what she does in that, but she does make it look easy, but it's not. So, and I think I'd just like to say as well, it's been such a privilege to work with Toria on this. Independent Thinking, I've always wanted it to be a platform. It's not about the machos. It's not about the egos. You know, Twitter for a while was sort of driven by ego, and it's interesting it's going to be killed by the ego of the guy who now owns it if we're not careful. But it's not about the egos. It's about giving people with something to say, a voice and a platform to say it, in order to make education better for the young people. So to be part of this project, right from that conversation we had after Toria interviewed me about standing in the woods listening to birds. I think that was the main part of the interview. And whenever I meet people, I'm always thinking, you know, where's the book in them? And it was so obvious where the book was here. So it has been a real privilege to be part of it, and just sit here today and listen to you, and then to go back to some of the voices, you know, as I went through it and edited it. And thank you all of you as well who allowed me, as with my editor hat on, just to sort of tweak some of the voices, just some of the language sometimes, because it's so there is no ego. You weren't saying, oh no, you can't touch my words, they're precious. We all work collaboratively to get the best possible book out. So thank you for making that part of my job sort of so easy as well. Thanks also to Gemma, who's had either the football or the rugby behind her all afternoon, so that I'm not quite sure what I'll be missing, but I know I'll be missing something. So yeah, I'm not sure whether I appreciate it. It's stopped now. Who knows who won? Who knows who was playing? But no, it's just been a privilege to listen to you and to hear the voices behind the words. I wasn't sure, and even coming on at, what was it, 1 o'clock, you know, how are we going to make this last for nearly 3 hours? And then as soon as Toria started talking, and then some of you started talking, I thought, no, we'll make it last. It'll be finishing it after 3 hours. That'll be the challenge, I think. And it'll be great for those of you who can make the actual the live event, which is January January the 14th. Is that the actual? Yeah, it'd be great to meet you in person. I helped choose the venue, and one of the things that sold it was the fact that there was a bar sort of in the same space. So for you Edu Drinks people, I don't think we'll get there till 1 o'clock, but we'll try and start early on that January the 14th. So I was getting a little bit disillusioned with the direction of education in the UK because of the machos, because of the egos, because of that ideological drive. This is how, like Alison was saying, this is how you do it. You must teach like this. If you don't do it, you're wrong. In Independent Thinking, we just say there is another way. We're not going to argue. We're not going to get on Twitter and have a fight with people. We're not going to get into those sorts of things. We're just saying, look, you can think that, but there is another way. Here's a school doing it differently. Here's a teacher doing it differently. And what's reassuring to me sitting here for these nearly 3 hours is that there are some fantastic people who are not being pushed by the egos and the machos and the ideology, who are saying we put children at the heart and we work in this way, and it works, and it's fine, and it's good, and it's the way we should. So you've sort of rekindled my belief that the education system, certainly in England, I know we've got people beyond England, but certainly in England is not a lost cause, and that there is a golden thread going through it of positivity and optimism and love for children and for each other and for the community that we're all part of. So thank you so much for that. Thank you, Drew, for letting me be part of it.
Thanks, Ian. And yeah, I'm so grateful to you for your support and guidance, because I genuinely did think, I mean, I get what that person did when they sent off the first draft and went, I'm done, because I actually didn't think I was far off with my first draft. I didn't think it would take a year and a half more. You know, but it has been a really interesting one. But I do believe, if I go back to what I was saying at the beginning, I do believe that we have created a great book, a resource for all educators out there, leaders, teachers, teaching assistants. You know, we are, our voices, the collective voices, will impact on the children in our classrooms, and I think that's absolutely vital. And, you know, I do have a very strong belief about that positive place of education in England. I really do. But I think, going back to those macho voices can be the ones that are just so loud. They were the ones that stopped me tweeting initially. You know, I remember before 2020, January 2020, I was secretly on Twitter as such, but I would just retweet. And I retweeted because I was too scared to tweet anything of my own before, you know, in case someone jumped on it. And I think I realized what an issue it was when it was a really random question. It was like, what book would you recommend to a year 4 child? And I thought, oh God, I can't do that in case they disagree with my choice. And actually, what a simple question. You know, I could easily answer that question, but you know, it's like people have said here, it's that overthinking, it's that anxiety and so on. But actually here today, I don't know about all of you, but I feel really empowered listening to your voices. Now, if your voices are going out there into the world of education, it's like dominoes. Just by you sort of talking and using your voice, you're going to impact on others that will use theirs and use theirs and use theirs. And actually, it comes back to what I was saying about the children in our classrooms. Imagine a future where our children have learned to use their voices and feel empowered to do so. That's really something. And every single one of you here is actually making that happen. I couldn't be happier to be part of all of this. Okay, I'm really conscious of time now, people. I could keep going, but I won't. So, Nina, you have been phenomenal today. You have sat there quietly behind the scenes, sorting out all the IT, just being truly, truly brilliant. So big round of applause for Nina, everyone.
That's a massive job for me to even be quiet. Isn't that right, Mr. Gilbert?
Out of interest, Nina, I'm going to put you on the spot here. How have you found this afternoon?
Oh my gosh, I had moments where my eyes were having a shower. Okay. It was almost like as if you were all in my world as well, because all of your voices spoke so passionately about what really matters in education, which is the heart, the relationships, being humble about who we are, but also in a very quiet and sophisticated way, slowly but surely raising your voice where it's got a space and others will listen, because there's been such a gentle approach that, as Alison mentioned at the beginning, I've just wanted to listen to every single word, with the beautiful pauses, with people's voices and all of their messages. So from me to all of you, congratulations. I mean, it is really something quite spectacular. Taria, for you to pull it all together. Ian, for you when you're tweaking, and we won't say too much about the language, but we know what we're talking about, don't we? And, you know, just have an amazing, amazing journey ahead, and throw your books in the air and be not afraid to bring your voices to the service and cause a few rumbles.
Yes, we're all about rumbles, Nina. Now, Nina, at the very beginning in your chat, you put something. What did you put, and can you remind people of it?
Oh, yes. Please, could you either express one word or a sentence to sum up either your experience of the book launch today, or something particular where you've already read in Tiny Voices? That would be fabulous. Thank you. So off you go.
So I'll let everyone do that. Go on, people. You need to put in the chat. So, Mummy, I'm just telling you, the chat's down at the bottom. You need to click on the chat button and you'll see it.
So when we save the video, Toria, and you get to see
Yeah.
the chat as well as the video, to bring all of these threads of the words and the sentences together, I think will be a very, very beautiful thing. So I'm now going to shush and mute myself while you take the platform to celebrate all about you and Tiny Voices.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for giving up your afternoon. And I realised that it wasn't a quick book launch. I realised that it was a long book launch. But actually, I am so grateful that you have had your voices heard. And I'm so grateful that if you haven't had your voice heard here, you've had it heard in the book, or that you are listening. Thank you so much to every single one of you. Now, there are a couple of things that I want you to do, because we're on that Tiny Voice Talks mission, people. We need to get it out there. So first thing, can I just say, you've really done poorly in the whole golden coin thing. So Kate Jane, where are you? You did the best at trying to get people to give reviews. I don't know, Ian, if you saw this, I promised the Tiny Voices golden coins, like the chocolate store, if they managed to get people to do Amazon reviews. Yeah. So I quite like Dave Tushingham. He basically, I think it was Dave, you did your own review, which I quite liked. But sadly, no golden coins for that. You need to get other people to do the reviewing. So I would really like it if we can get some Amazon reviews, because I think that would just raise the voices up. And then what we're talking about the whole time is that impact. So we've got more impact in the schools. If you want to get involved with what we're going to be doing in Twitter with regards to the live chat as such, do let Penny know. And if you want to be part of Dave's book thing in January, do let Dave know. And it just leaves me to say thank you so much to every single one of you that has been here this afternoon. Go off and continue to flap your wings. Thank you.